Chapter 1. The gear in the gutter the storm drain in the Iron District was clogged again. A viscous, rust-colored soup crept over the third step, forming a small whirlpool at Leo Miller's feet. He crouched behind a roll-down gate of reliable hardware, a half-rusted wrench clutched in his hand, listening to the rain hammer a staccato beat on the corrugated metal awning. In his pocket, his phone vibrated against his leg, a text from his landlord, Ms. Rodriguez. The final sentence, in bold red letters, felt like a death warrant. Rent's going up $500 this month. Pay tomorrow or you're out. At 22, Leo took a deep breath. The humid air was a foul mix of wet asphalt and the smell of greasy onions from the dive bar next door. He glanced down at the cardboard box by his feet, filled with the day's scrap haul. On top sat a palm-sized bronze cog, its surface etched with a dense network of intricate lines, like a part from some antique machine. He'd found it that morning in a dumpster behind the apartments, heavy and strangely cold to the touch. "Now, what are you dawdling for?" Brenda's drill sergeant voice cut through the downpour. She stood silhouetted in the shop's entrance, her wide frame blocking the only light, hands on her hips. "Where are the pipe fittings for Mr. Henderson? If you don't find them, I'm docking your pay for the day." "Coming," Leo called back. He shoved the bronze cog into his pocket and ducked into the cluttered back room. This was his break room, a small space partitioned off with plywood. A folding cot took up most of the room, and on the wall were several yellowed mechanical blueprints he'd sketched in secret. No one knew that this high school dropout could deconstruct the schematics of a precision instrument without a single error. As he rummaged through the shelves, a black shadow flickered in his peripheral vision outside the small window. It moved with unnatural speed, almost sliding along the ground, the rain kicking up a fine arc behind it. Leo rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, there was nothing but the deluge washing over the street. "What are you spacing out for?" Brenda was suddenly standing in the doorway, swinging a feather duster. "Useless is as useless does. I'd be better off with a guard dog." The duster slapped against his back. Leo didn't flinch. He'd been taking this kind of abuse for 3 years, ever since his dad's company went bankrupt and he'd jumped from the 17th floor. He silently handed her the pipe fittings. His fingertips brushed her hand, and she recoiled as if shocked, wiping her hand on her shirt in disgust. "Get away from me. You look like you crawled out of a sewer." After Brenda left, Leo collapsed onto the cot, the bronze cog digging into his hip. He pulled it out, cradling it in his palm. In the faint streetlight filtering through the grimy window, the etched lines seemed to come alive, flowing slowly across the metal surface. His phone buzzed again. A collections text from the hospital. His sister Chloe's dialysis payment was due tomorrow. Otherwise, he clenched his fist, and the cog in his palm emitted a faint hum. Suddenly, the bare bulb overhead sparked with a fizz and died, plunging the room into darkness. A searing pain shot through Leo's hand. He instinctively opened his palm, and the bronze cog floated in midair, its etchings glowing with an ethereal blue light. Stranger still, he heard a sound. Not the rain, not the distant traffic, but a faint, intricate clicking like the turning of gears coming from the cog itself. Then, lines of pale blue text scrolled across his vision, like lines of computer code. "Compatible host detected. Initiating bonding protocol. Warning, insufficient energy reserves. Forcing emergency mode. Bonding complete. Current authority, 0.01%. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He reached for the floating cog. The moment his fingers touched it, the world seemed to shift into slow motion. Raindrops hung suspended in the air. Brenda's voice, yelling at a customer out front, became a distorted, dragging sound like an old cassette tape. He could count the molecules in his own slow-motion breath. What is this?" he whispered, his voice unervingly clear in the silence. Just then, the black shadow appeared outside the window again. This time, Leo saw it clearly, a man in a black trench coat, his face hidden in the shadows of a deep hood, carrying a silver briefcase. The terrifying part was that his feet weren't touching the ground. He hovered silently above the floodwater, rain passing right through him, leaving his coat impossibly dry. The man seemed to sense Leo's gaze and slowly turned his head. Beneath the hood, there was no face, only a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. A chill shot up Leo's spine. He tried to move, but his body was frozen in place. The man in the trench coat raised a hand, pointing at Leo. Instantly, the phone in Leo's pocket vibrated violently. The screen lit up with an incoming call from a blocked number. At the same time, the floating cog dropped to the floor, its blue light extinguished. The world snapped back to normal speed. The sounds of rain, voices, and traffic rushed back in. Leo scrambled to the doorway and looked out. The street was empty, save for the streams of rainwater. Breathing heavily, he looked back. The cog lay on the floor, looking like any other piece of junk. But his phone was still buzzing, the blocked number flashing insistently. After a few seconds of hesitation, he swiped to answer. "You found the gear?" The voice on the other end was raspy, like sandpaper on steel. "Don't even think about hiding it. Sector 7 is already onto you. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, the old Bethlehem Steel Yard. Bring it, and you can have your sister back." The line went dead. Leo's knuckles were white from gripping the phone. He looked at the cog on the floor, then thought of the hovering man in the rain. A primal fear seized him. His sister. How did they know about Chloe? Suddenly, the back room door creaked open and Brenda poked her head in. "What's all the racket?" Sounded like you were talking to yourself. Her eyes scanned the floor and landed on the cog, widening slightly. "What's this? Looks like it might be worth something. Give it here." Leo instinctively snatched the cog and shoved it in his pocket. "It's nothing. Just some junk I picked up." "Junk? More like you're trying to pocket it." Brenda's temper flared. She lunged forward to search him. "Hand it over. Everything in this store, down to the last nail, is mine." In the struggle, Leo's arm slammed into a shelf. A box of nails tumbled off, spilling onto Brenda's foot. She shrieked, hopping on one foot and jabbing a finger at his face. "You little punk. You did that on purpose. I'll skin you alive for that." She grabbed a steel pipe leaning against the wall and swung it at his head. Leo instinctively raised his arm to block it. Just as the pipe was about to make contact, he felt the cog in his pocket grow hot, and the blue text flashed again in his vision. "Authority 0.01%, parry command triggered." The next second, the impossible happened. Brenda's steel pipe hit an invisible wall and snapped in two with a loud clang. She froze, clutching the broken half, her eyes wide as dinner plates. Leo was just as stunned. He looked at his arm, then at the pieces of pipe on the floor. His heart felt like it was going to burst out his chest. What the hell is going on? Just then, the screech of tires sounded from the street. A black Mercedes sedan pulled up in the rain. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a tailored suit stepped out, holding a black umbrella. His hair was slicked back, not a strand out of place. He walked directly into the store, his gaze sweeping from a terrified Brenda to Leo, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Miller, I presume? My name is Marcus Thorne." The man offered a gold-embossed business card. "I believe we have a great deal to discuss." Leo stared at the card. Vice President, Eon Corporation, and then into the man's eyes, which seemed to see right through him. He suddenly remembered the phone call. "Sector 7 is already onto you." A cold sweat drenched his back. Was this man here to take the cog? Or was he from the so-called Sector 7? Thorne seemed to read his mind, offering a reassuring smile. "Relax. I'm not here to take anything from you." He gestured to the broken pipe on the floor. "It seems the gear has already chosen its new master." Leo's head snapped up. This man knew what the cog was called. Thorne's smile vanished, his tone turning serious. "Mr. Miller, the object in your possession is tied to the fate of a great many people. It's not just Sector 7 looking for it now. Other factions are in play. If you trust me, come with me tonight. I can guarantee your safety and your sister's." The rain continued to fall. Brenda had long since retreated to a corner, terrified into silence. It was just Leo and Thorne now. Leo's hand tightened around the cog in his pocket. Its cold, solid feel helped ground him. On one hand, a mysterious caller threatening his sister. On the other, a stranger who appeared out of nowhere, knew about the cog. And then there was that hovering phantom in the rain. Who could he possibly trust? Sensing his hesitation, Thorne opened his briefcase and took out an envelope. "Here's $10,000. For your sister's medical bills." He paused. "If you refuse, I'm afraid you won't make it to tomorrow." Someone far less pleasant will come knocking. Leo stared at the thick envelope, the hospital's text message burning in his mind. He felt like he was caught in an invisible vice. He knew he had no other choice. "I'll go with you," he heard himself say, his voice trembling. A satisfied smile spread across Thorne's face. A wise decision. Just as Leo started to follow Thorne to the door, his phone vibrated one last time. It wasn't a call, but a picture message from an unknown sender. He opened it. It was a photo of his sister, Chloe, sitting up in her hospital bed, smiling brightly for the camera. But in the background, standing in the doorway of her room, was the silhouette of a man in a black trench coat, the space beneath his hood a vortex of pure darkness. The message contained only 3 words: "Don't trust him." Leo froze, the blood turning to ice in his veins. He looked at the gentle, smiling Marcus Thorne, then back at the terrifying figure in the photo. A bone-deep chill crawled up his spine. Who was the enemy? Who could he believe? Thorne noticed his expression and followed his gaze to the phone screen. The smile on his face slowly dissolved, replaced by a cold, detached indifference. "It seems they're moving faster than I anticipated." He suddenly shot his hand out and grabbed Leo's arm. The grip was like steel. Thorne's voice was low and dangerous. "Mr. Miller, there's no more time for indecision. Come with me, or die right here." The rain fell, washing over the city's sins and secrets. Leo looked into Thorne's cold eyes, thought of his sister's smiling face, and felt the bronze cog in his pocket begin to burn, as if urging him to make a choice. His destiny, from the moment he'd pulled that mysterious piece of metal from a dumpster, had already been irrevocably changed. Chapter 2. When the gear turns Marcus Thorne's hand was a vice, squeezing Leo's arm until it ached. The Mercedes' engine idled, its wipers methodically sweeping arcs across the windshield. "Let him go," Brenda suddenly shrieked, a rusty box cutter appearing in her hand. A moment ago she was hiding behind a shelf, but now she was a cornered animal, her face flushed. "This is my store. You can't just drag people out of here. I'm calling the cops." Thorne shot her a sideways glance. The iciness in his eyes made the box cutter clatter to the floor. He pulled a black leather wallet from his suit jacket, tossed a wad of $100 bills onto the counter. "That should cover a dozen steel pipes and your emotional distress for the evening." Brenda's eyes immediately glued to the cash. Her bravado evaporated as she wrung her hands. "Well, Mr. Thorne, you didn't have to." Leo used the distraction to wrench his arm free. As he stumbled back, the cog in his pocket grew scorching hot. Blue text flashed at the edge of his vision. High threat target detected. Authority 0.01% activating early warning. Before he could react, Thorne reached for him again. This time, Leo sidestepped instinctively, his movement so fast it surprised even him. He'd never had a day of combat training in his life, yet it was as if he'd anticipated Thorne's exact move. "Not bad," Thorne said, an eyebrow raised in amusement. "It seems the gear is adapting you faster than I expected. What do you want?" Leo clenched his fists, the cog's heat burning through the fabric of his jeans. "What is this gear? And who is Sector 7? Thorne suddenly turned to the doorway. In the rain-swept darkness, several shadows were moving, their speed inhuman. No time to explain. He grabbed Leo's wrist and yanked him toward the door. "We'll talk in the car." "They're here." Leo stumbled, but caught a glimpse of the calendar on the shelf, a cheap cartoon calendar Brenda's son had bought her. Today's date was circled in red, with payday scrawled beside it. But tucked into the plastic sleeve of the calendar, something was reflecting the light. A photograph. It was an old, yellowed photo, its corners curled with age. In it, a young man in a mechanic's jumpsuit stood before a derelict factory. He looked strikingly like Leo, and in his hand, he was holding a metal part almost identical to the bronze cog. "What is that?" Leo stopped dead in his tracks. Thorne followed his gaze, his expression tightening. "Don't worry about it." But Leo had already lunged for it, ripping the calendar from the wall. The photo fluttered to the ground. On the back, written in pen, was a single line, July 15th, 1998. Gear 1 test failure. David Miller. David Miller. That was his father's name. Leo's mind roared. His dad was in real estate. What was he doing in an old photo at a factory, holding something that looked like the gear? "Your father was a compatible." Thorne's voice came from behind him, laced with a complex emotion. He failed to protect the gear all those years ago, and that's why he was cut off as the store's front door shattered inward. Amidst the spray of splintered wood, 3 figures in black trench coats stood in the doorway, identical to the shadow Leo had seen earlier. Their hoods were pulled low, and they each carried a silver briefcase. The rain slid off their coats, leaving the fabric completely dry. Director Thorne, taking the gear and it's compatible without authorization is a serious offense, the middle figure said, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. Hand him over, and we can pretend this never happened. Thorne pushed Leo behind him and pulled a silver, pen-like object from his jacket. It telescoped open into a short, gleaming blade. A dog from Sector 7 dares to give me orders? Then I suppose we'll have to take him. The words had barely left his mouth before the man's form blurred. Leo's vision swam, and suddenly the agent was in front of him, a pale hand emerging from the darkness of his hood, reaching for Leo's pocket. Watch out! Thorne's blade sliced through the air, but the agent caught it effortlessly between 2 fingers. With a screech of metal on metal, Thorne's face went pale. An augmented operative? They sent one of you. The gear is worth it, the agent sneered and twisted his wrist. Thorne grunted in pain as the blade was torn from his grasp, flying through the air and landing in a bucket of greasy water. He staggered back, pulling a small cylinder from his briefcase and slamming on the ground. Thick white smoke instantly filled the room. He grabbed Leo and dragged him toward the back door. This way, get to the old steel yard. Wait, my sister, I've already sent someone to the hospital. Thorne's voice was muffled by the smoke. Trust me, just this once. The back door opened into a narrow alley piled high, with trash cans and discarded furniture. Thorne pulled Leo along at a dead run, mud and filthy water splashing their clothes. Leo glanced back and saw dark shapes bursting through the smoke, moving with the speed of cheetahs. Why do they want this thing so badly? Leo gasped, his lungs burning. It's not just a thing. Thorne leaped over a puddle. It's the Kronos gear. He stopped abruptly, freezing in place. Leo almost crashed into him. Following his gaze, he saw an old man in a white lab coat standing at the end of the alley. He leaned on a cane, and his glasses glinted in the darkness. Marcus, my boy. Long time no see, the old man said with a smile, tapping his cane on the pavement. Leave the gear, and I'll let you walk away. Dr. Finch, Thorne's voice was filled with disbelief. But you're supposed to be dead? The old man chuckled. What's dying once in the pursuit of knowledge? You, on the other hand, betraying the project to join the Kronos Guard. Aren't you afraid of the consequences? Leo felt the gear in his pocket burn. The blue text scrolled frantically across his vision. Temporal anomaly detected. Energy fluctuation match. Danger level extreme. Is he with Sector 7? Leo whispered. Worse. He's with the revisionists. Thorne's voice was tight with fear. They're fanatics who want to use the gear to rewrite the past. Dr. Finch suddenly raised his cane. The tip popped open, revealing a metal tube aimed directly at Leo. Such a shame to waste a compatible before he's even activated. The instant a beam of white light shot from the tube, Leo's body moved on its own. He threw himself to the ground as the beam seared the air where his head had been, blasting a fist-sized hole in the brick wall behind him. Oh, instincts awakening, are they? Dr. Finch raised an eyebrow. All the more reason you can't be left alive. He pulled the trigger again, but this time, everything slowed down for Leo. He could see the trajectory of the raindrops, Thorne's lunge to tackle him, even the minute flex of Dr. Finch's finger. Authority 0.01%. Precognition command triggered. As the blue text faded, Leo instinctively grabbed a loose brick from the ground and hurled it. Crack! The brick smashed squarely into the metal tube in Dr. Finch's hand. The white beam shot wide, hitting a nearby dumpster, which instantly melted into a slag heap, hissing white smoke. Dr. Finch was stunned. Thorne was stunned. Leo himself was stunned. When had he become so accurate? Interesting. Dr. Finch adjusted his glasses. His cane split open, revealing the barrel of a gun. But this is where it ends. Just then, the sound of sirens echoed from the mouth of the alley. Flashing red and blue lights cut through the rain. Faintly, they could hear Brenda's voice yelling, "Officers! Over here! They have guns!" It's an armed robbery. Dr. Finch's face hardened. How did the police get here? I sent a distress signal, Thorne said, grabbing Leo and pulling him toward a low wall. Let's go. They scrambled over the wall into a demolition site, a graveyard of broken foundations and twisted rebar that looked like monster skeletons in the rain. Leo collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, realizing his hands were slick with cold sweat. Are you going to tell me what's going on now? He demanded, looking at Thorne. The Kronos gear, the Kronos guard, the revisionists, and my dad. How did he really die? Thorne leaned against a broken wall, pulling a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He lit two, handing one to Leo. Your dad was one of the first members of the Kronos guard. 30 years ago, he was assigned to protect the gear. When the project went critical, he initiated a self-destruct sequence to keep the revisionists from getting it. Self-destruct? Leo crushed the cigarette in his hand. Then what's this? A fail-safe, Thorne said, exhaling a plume of smoke. A backup your dad hid away. He knew that one day they would find you. Leo was speechless. He'd always believed his dad killed himself over a business failure. He never imagined this. It explained why his family never talked about his father's past, why his dad's study had always felt like it held secrets. What can the Kronos gear actually do? Change time. Thorne's voice dropped. It can go to the past, or even his words were cut off by a tremor. It wasn't his phone. It was the ground itself. Leo looked down. The gear in his pocket was glowing an intense blue, the lines on its surface writhing like living snakes. In the distance, the sky tore open. It looked as if someone had taken an axe to the fabric of reality. The rift glowed a sickly purple, and within it, countless fragments of something swirled, emitting a high-pitched shriek. Damn it! Thorne's face was ashen. It's a resonance cascade. They're force-starting the main gear. Leo felt like the rift was pulling at his soul, making it hard to breathe. He looked at Thorne. What do we do now? Thorne glanced from the widening rift to Leo, and then did something completely unexpected. He dropped to one knee. Marcus Thorne of the Kronos Guard, at your service, guardian of the new gear. Leo was completely bewildered. What are you doing? From the moment your father hid the fail-safe, you became its sole heir. Thorne's voice was grave. Only you can stop them now. The gear's energy is drawn from the Guardian's bloodline. Your blood. He trailed off as Leo felt a sharp pain in the back of his neck. The world went black. As he fell, he thought he saw a smile on Thorne's face, a smile just like Dr. Finch's. In his hand was a syringe. Sorry, kid. Thorne's voice grew faint. After all, who wouldn't want to control time itself? The last thing Leo felt before he lost consciousness was the gear in his pocket exploding with blue light. Something cold and wet trickled down his neck. It was blood. His blood. The drops hit the gear, and its etchings flared with a blinding white light, illuminating Thorne's shocked face like a flash of lightning. And from the rift in the sky, something was beginning to crawl out. Chapter 3. The blood packed and the cage as the white light receded from the edge of his consciousness. Leo smelled rust. It wasn't the smell from the hardware store, mixed with oil and grime. This was a pure, metallic tang, like someone had crushed the rust from an entire steel mill and forced it into his nostrils. He blinked his eyes open and found himself on a cold concrete floor. The room was dark, the only light reflecting off the iron manacles on his wrists. Both hands were chained to the wall, where the faint, peeling words, "safety first," were still visible. He was in some kind of abandoned factory. Awake, are we? Thorne's voice echoed from the shadows, laced with a grating amusement. Leo turned his head and saw him sitting in a broken chair, tossing the bronze cog, the Kronos gear, in his hand. It was no longer a dull bronze. Its lines glowed with a faint red light, as if it had drunk its fill of blood. What do you really want? Leo struggled to sit up, the chafing of the chains on his wrists sharpening his senses. The Kronos guard, the Guardian, was all a lie? Not entirely, Thorne said, catching the gear with a crisp metallic click that echoed in the cavernous space. Your father was indeed part of the guard, and the gear does require a bloodline to activate. The only question is, once activated, who gets to be in control? He stood and walked over to Leo, squatting down. He poked the gear's red glow with a white-gloved finger. Did you know, 30 years ago, when your father activated this, time stood still in half the city for 3 minutes? In those 3 minutes, fortunes were made, lives were lost and remade, and one man got to relive his first date. Leo's heart skipped a beat. You want to use it to make money? Money. Thorn laughed, as if it were the funniest joke he'd ever heard. He grabbed the front of Leo's shirt. I want to rewrite the rules. How do you think Eon Corp got its start? Every market crash, I pulled out just in time. Every policy shift, I was perfectly positioned. You think that was luck? He pulled a small metal sliver from his pocket, etched with lines similar to the gears. This is a time shard, a fragment that broke off the main gear. Even a piece this small lets me see 10 minutes into the future. Leo thought of the eviction notices, Brenda's insults, the smell of antiseptic in Chloe's dialysis ward. If you could see the future, couldn't you avoid all that pain? The thought had barely formed before he crushed it. If everyone could rewrite their own timeline, the world would descend into chaos. You're no different from those revisionist fanatics. There's a world of difference, Thorn said, letting go and fastidiously wiping his glove with a handkerchief. They want to go back. I only want to control what's next. And I, unlike them, understand the rules. Every turn of the gear has a cost. Your father didn't understand restraint. He burned himself out. My dad died in an accident. Leo yelled. That was the cover story. Thorn's voice grew cold. The last time he used the gear, it was to save your mother. There was a power outage at the hospital that day. Her surgery would have failed. He turned back time by 30 minutes. The cost was 10 years of his own life, accelerated. Leo was stunned. He remembered his mom dying when he was 10. At the funeral, his dad's hair had turned gray overnight. He thought it was grief. Now he knew it was decay. You brought me here to force me to use the gear. Clever boy. Thorn clapped his hands. The bloodline activation is just the first step. It requires a willing sacrifice from the Guardian. Don't worry, I won't make you work for free. Your sister's illness. I can cure it. He took a file from his briefcase and tossed it in front of Leo. This is the latest stem cell therapy from Europe. Cooperate with me, and I'll have her transferred immediately. Leo stared at the words 98% recovery rate on the document, his throat tightening. He felt for his pocket. His phone was gone. He had no way of even contacting the hospital. Just then, the gear hummed, its red light flickering. Thorn's expression changed. He pulled out a small device and tapped it a few times. What's happening? The energy fluctuation is off the charts. Outside the factory, tires screeched, followed by the sound of gunfire. It wasn't a pistol. It was something heavier, something that made the walls shake and dust rain from the ceiling. Thorn shot to his feet and peered through a crack in a boarded-up window. Damn it, it's a Sector 7 strike team. How did they find this place? Leo scanned his surroundings. In the corner, there was a rusted piece of rebar just within reach. He began to inch his body toward it, the chain scraping faintly on the concrete. Stay still. Thorn shot him a glare, pulling a pistol from his waistband. Looks like we'll have to start early today. He walked over to Leo and used a small knife to prick his own fingertip, letting a drop of blood fall onto the gear. The red light intensified. Leo felt a burning sensation on his wrists, and the blue text appeared in his vision again. Non-compatible blood detected. Rejection protocol triggered. Energy overload warning. What's going on? Thorn stared at the unresponsive gear, his face growing darker. Why isn't it working? A bright flash lit up the window, followed by a deafening explosion that rocked the entire factory. The shock wave threw Thorn to the ground. His pistol skidded across the floor, stopping at Leo's feet. Without a second thought, Leo hooked the gun with his foot, kicking it up into his hand and aiming it at Thorn. His hand was shaking. It was the first time he'd ever held a gun. Don't be stupid. Thorn scrambled to his feet, his hand hovering over another device on his belt. I still have your sister. You never went to get her. Leo's voice trembled, but his resolve was firm. You were lying from the start, just to get me to activate the gear. When Thorn had said, I've already sent someone, Leo had noticed a slight tremor in his fingers. A nervous tick, the same one Brenda had when she was shortchanging his pay. Thorn's face fell. How did you know? Because you're not like my dad, Leo said, gripping the gun tighter. You have sacrificed himself to protect others. You only sacrifice others to protect yourself. At that moment, the factory doors burst open. A squad of soldiers in black tactical gear rushed in, wearing gas masks, and aiming their rifles at Thorn. The leader removed his mask, revealing a face covered in scars. His left eye was a robotic prosthetic, glowing red. Marcus Thorn, long time no see. The scarred man's voice was like gravel. I never thought you'd be hiding this deep. Kincaid, Thorn stepped back, his hand surreptitiously moving toward a button behind him. Sector 7's top dog, in the flesh. The order from on high was to secure the gear and the compatible alive. Kincaid's robotic eye swiveled to Leo, the red light scanning his face. Mr. Miller, come with us. We can guarantee your safety. Why should I trust you? Leo asked warily. What makes you different from him, or the revisionists? We follow the rules, Kincaid said, gesturing to the faded safety first sign on the wall. Like the men who used to work in this factory. Clock in, clock out. Don't touch the machines you're not supposed to. The gear is like a power press. Use it right, you can build something. Use it wrong, you lose a hand. Before he could finish, Thorn slammed the button in his hand. The floor beneath Leo gave way. He cried out as he fell. In that split second, he saw the gear in Thorn's hand erupt in a blinding red light. He saw Kincaid's men open fire, their bullets moving as slow as snails through the crimson glow. He felt a moment of weightlessness, then instinctively grabbed for the chains still dangling from his wrists. They snapped taut, leaving him hanging in midair over a bottomless pit. He could hear the faint sound of running water far below. Get him! Kincaid's roar echoed from above. Thorn's laughter reverberated through the red light. The gear is mine. No one can take it from me. Suddenly, Leo felt a burning heat in his hand. It was the gun. In his panic, he'd held onto it. Now, the barrel was searing hot, and lines like those on the gear were appearing on its surface. Weapon contact detected. Authority temporarily elevated to 0.1%. Lag shot, command triggered. As the blue text flashed, Leo, without thinking, aimed at the red light above and pulled the trigger. The moment the bullet left the barrel, time stretched like a rubber band. He could clearly see the bullet cutting through the red light and striking the gear in Thorn's hand. The gear's red glow flickered and died. The swirling lines on its surface froze into a strange, static pattern. Thorn's smile froze on his face. He looked down at the gear, then back up at Leo, his eyes filled with disbelief. Impossible. How could you? He never finished the sentence. Without the protection of the red light, a dozen bullets slammed into his body. As Thorn fell, the gear slipped from his grasp, tumbling down into the darkness, right toward Leo. Leo reached out his hand. Just as his fingertips were about to touch the gear, a multitude of hands shot out from the darkness below. They grabbed the gear, and they grabbed his ankles. The hands were pale and cold, their fingernails caked with dirt, as if they had clawed their way out of grave. Ark! Leo screamed as he was violently pulled downward. The chains groaned, the bolts in the wall beginning to tear loose. He looked up. Kincaid and his men were firing into the darkness, but the bullets passed through the arms as if they were smoke. 1,000 whispers rose from the pit, like 100 people talking at once. Leo understood one of the voices. It sounded exactly like his father. Don't touch it. It will consume you. The chain snapped. Leo plummeted into the icy water below. He choked, swallowing a mouthful, and felt something slimy brush against his leg. The gear was floating right in front of him, its lines no longer red or blue, but a dead, lifeless gray. Worse, he saw faces floating on the surface of the water. Men, women, old, young, all staring at him without expression. One of them was his mother, who had died 10 years ago. Leo, come here. His mother's face smiled at him, reaching out to touch his cheek. Leo's heart felt like it had been pierced by an icicle. He tried to pull away, but his body wouldn't move. The faces began to sink, pulling him down with them into the dark depths. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, he felt a vibration in his pocket. It wasn't a phone. It was the old photograph he'd taken for Brenda's calendar. The photo floated out of his drenched pocket and landed on the water. The moment the name David Miller on the back touched the water, it began to glow with a golden light, forming a complex pattern on the surface. The hands holding him instantly retreated into the darkness. The faces on the water vanished like bubbles. Leo felt a force lift him, pushing him toward the gear. This time, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed it. The cold metal sent a shock through him. The blue text in his vision lit up, brighter than ever before. Blood pact complete. Authority elevated to 1%. Temporal anchor unlocked. At the same time, he heard his father's voice, as clear as if he were standing right next to him. Leo, remember, every second the gear turns, it consumes the user's memories. Don't be like me. Don't forget who you are. Memories? A sharp pain lanced through Leo's head. A flood of unfamiliar images filled his mind. The summer of 1998, his dad in a jumpsuit, calibrating the gear in a factory. A hospital hallway, his dad's hair graying overnight as he stared at his mom's room. And himself as a small child, sitting on his father's shoulders, playing with a bronze cog exactly like the one in his hand. He had forgotten all of it. Get him! Kincaid's voice boomed from above. A searchlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on Leo's face. Leo clutched the gear, finally understanding what his father meant. The price of controlling time wasn't your life, it was your memories. The painful, the sweet, the ones you want to hold on to, the ones you try to forget. The gear would grind them all away. He looked up at the light, then down at the gear in his hand. He had two choices: go with Kincaid and become a tool for Sector 7, or take the gear and run, facing all the hungry factions alone. Just then, the gear hummed urgently, its lines pointing toward the southeast corner of the factory above. On the wall there, one brick was a different color from the rest. Temporal anomaly detected. Distance 100 feet. Leo took a deep breath and swam with all his might in that direction. He could hear Kincaid's furious shouts and the sound of gunfire behind him, but he knew he had to go. Not just for Chloe or for his dad, but to remember who he was. The moment his fingers touched the loose brick, the world began to spin. The gear erupted in a blinding light, engulfing him. The last thing Leo saw before he blacked out was a yellowed slip of paper tucked behind the brick, with a sentence written in pencil. On the other side of the gear, you'll find the time debt. Chapter 4. The Debt and the Cat. When the spinning stopped, Leo was lying on a pile of musty hay. The air was thick with the smell of old dust and mothballs. He pushed himself up and found he was in a cramped attic. Faded stuffed animals hung from the slanted wooden beams, and in the corner, a stack of cardboard boxes reached halfway to the ceiling, stamped with the words Northwood Elementary, class of 1999. The chains were gone. His wet clothes were now bone dry, as if they'd been baked. Leo reached into his pocket. The Chronos gear was there, its lines back to their original bronze color, except for a tiny nick on the edge where the bullet had struck. Where am I? He stood up and bumped his head on a box overhead. A few books tumbled out. On the cover of the top one, a lopsided sun was drawn in crayon next to the name Leo Miller. Leo's breath caught in his throat. This was his old third-grade textbook. He remembered this attic. It was the storage space in his grandfather's old house, where he used to play hide-and-seek. But his grandpa's house had been torn down 5 years ago to make way for a strip mall. He went to the attic's only window and pushed open the dusty wooden frame. Outside wasn't the familiar sight of his grandfather's quiet suburban street, but the grimy back alley of the Iron District. The smell of the greasy spoon diner wafted up. He could see Brenda yelling at someone in front of Reliable Hardware, and even the path where Thorne had dragged him. But something was wrong. The corner store signs still read Old Man Hemlock's, but Mr. Hemlock had died last year, and the place was now a vape shop. Weirder still, just moments ago it had been pouring rain, but now the sun was beating down, making heat rise in waves from the asphalt. Did time go backward? Leo pulled out the gear. The moment his fingers touched the metal, blue text flashed in his vision. Temporal anchor calibrated. Current time, June 15th, 2023, 10:03 a.m. Timeline rewound by 2 hours and 17 minutes. 2 hours? He suddenly remembered what Thorne had said about the cost. His heart clenched. He frantically checked his pockets. The old photograph of his dad was still there, but the name David Miller on the back had faded, as if blurred by water. Consuming memories, Leo whispered, his fingertips cold. The images he'd remembered in the water were already growing hazy. He couldn't even recall the color of his dad's jumpsuit. The attic stairs creaked. Someone was coming up. Leo quickly hid behind the boxes, clutching the gear in his pocket. The footsteps were light, like a small animal's. A moment later, a ginger cat poked its head up from the stairwell. It had amber eyes and a faded red collar. It scanned the attic cautiously. It was Mrs. Gable's cat from next door, Marmalade. He'd run off 3 days ago. She'd been asking everyone about him. Leo relaxed. Just as he was about to step out, Marmalade leaped onto a box and pawed open a tin of old cookies. Then impossibly it spoke. Its voice was like a petulant child's. That guy's blood tasted awful. Not nearly as good as the tuna from Hemlock's. Leo's eyes widened. He almost knocked over the box he was hiding behind. A talking cat? Marmalade seemed to hear the noise. It whipped its head around, its amber eyes fixed on the spot where Leo was hiding. Who's there? Show yourself. Leo swallowed hard and slowly stepped out. Marmalade's fur stood on end. It arched its back and hissed. You have the scent of the gear on you. Are you with the Kronos Guard or the Revisionists? I'm neither, Leo said, trying to keep his voice calm. My name is Leo. I'm the Gear's Guardian. Guardian? Marmalade paused, then let out a shrill laugh that sounded like a fork scraping a plate. You? You can't even raise a basic energy shield. You got beaten half to death by that suit, and you call yourself a Guardian? It had seen what happened. Leo suddenly thought about the time rewind. Had the cat been caught in it too? Or was it not a normal cat at all? What are you? What? Marmalade's ears drooped as if offended. I'm a temporal familiar, and I've been bound to the gear for 300 years. If that old quack in a lab coat hadn't ambushed me and forced me back into my juvenile form, those clowns from last night wouldn't have even been an appetizer. Temporal familiar? 300 years? Leo felt his understanding of the world cracking. He looked at the red collar around Marmalade's neck and remembered Mrs. Gable saying she'd found him 6 months ago, and he'd been wearing it then. Do you know my dad? David Miller. Marmalade's ears twitched. It hopped down and rubbed against Leo's leg. Oh, that fool. Spent 10 years of his life to save your mother. And in the end, he forgot even the most basic controls for the gear. If I hadn't pulled the memory fragments he hid in the gear seams, you wouldn't even remember his face. Leo's heart leaped. Memory fragments? That piece of paper in your pocket. Marmalade flicked its tail toward his pants. It's a temporal sigil, forged from his blood and memory. That's what saved you in the water. But you just used up all its energy by forcing a time rewind. If you don't preserve it soon, it will fade completely. Leo quickly pulled out the photograph. The image on it was already turning translucent. The paper itself was as thin as a cicada's wing. How do I preserve it? You need to pay the time debt, Marmalade said, licking its paw. Every time the gear alters time, it incurs a debt that must be repaid with an equal amount of chronal energy. Your dad racked up a huge debt. In the end, he used himself as collateral. What's chronal energy? It's time itself, Marmalade said, leaping onto the windowsill and looking down at the street. See that old man on the delivery bike? He has 3 years left to live. That's chronal energy. That girl in the school uniform? She's had a crush on her classmate for 3 months. That unspoken time is also chronal energy. Even the 2 hours you just rewound. That's a debt. It has to be filled with other time. Leo thought of the hospital bills. It turned out time, like money, had to be paid back. So how much do I owe? Marmalade squinted, as if calculating. Forcibly interrupting Thorn's ritual, you owe him 10 years of his life. Rewinding time by 2 hours, you owe everyone in this district a collective 733 years of potential time. And activating the sigil to save yourself, you owe the last remnant of your father's soul. It yawned. Basically a lot. Enough to turn you into a pile of dust right now. A cold sweat broke out on Leo's back. Then why am I okay? Because someone else paid part of it for you. Marmalade's gaze fell on the end of the alley. See that old woman in the floral dress? She was supposed to slip while grocery shopping this morning, break her hip, and be bedridden for 3 months. Because of your time rewind, she's fine. The gear took those 3 months to pay down your debt. Leo followed its gaze. It was Mrs. Gable from the next building over. She used to give him candy when he was a kid. He'd seen her just last month, sitting on the stoop enjoying the sun. But that's stealing. All time is borrowed, Marmalade said, hopping off the sill and rubbing its head against Leo's leg. You have 2 choices. Throw the gear away now, go back to being a wage slave, and wait for the debt to come and tear you apart. Or learn from me how to control the gear and go earn the time to pay it back. Leo clutched the photograph, his father's fading image seeming to watch him. He thought of Chloe's pale face in the hospital, Brenda's feathered duster, Thorne's cold smile. If he threw the gear away, could he go back to his old life? Would the bills, the rent hikes, Chloe's illness just disappear? How do I earn time? Marmalade's eyes lit up. Smart choice. Follow me. I'll introduce you to a creditor. It hopped down the attic stairs, and Leo followed. As they passed through the living room, he saw the calendar on the wall was set to June 15th, matching the gear's display. His grandfather's old clock ticked away, the patina on its pendulum exactly as he remembered. At the end of the alley, Marmalade stopped and nodded toward the diner. That guy in the trench coat. He's been watching you ever since you rewound time. Leo's heart skipped a beat. He looked over. A man in a black trench coat stood across from the diner, his hood pulled low, a silver briefcase in his hand. It was the same shadow from the rain. The man seemed to sense his gaze and slowly looked up. The space under his hood was still a swirling darkness, but Leo felt a familiar thrum, the same feeling he got when he held the gear. Source energy fluctuation detected. Danger level. Unknown. As the blue text flashed, the man turned and disappeared into a side alley. Marmalade's first stood on end. It's a temporal echo. People whose time has been consumed by the gear turn into those things. They're trapped in the gaps of time, feeding on other people's chronal energy to survive. Why didn't he attack me? I don't know. Marmalade's voice was tense. But him following you can't be good. Let's go. It hurried down another alley, and Leo followed close behind. As they passed Reliable Hardware, he saw Brenda swatting a young man with a feather duster. The young man's back was identical to his own. It was him from 2 hours ago. Don't look back. Marmalade hissed. When timelines overlap, seeing your past self accelerates your chronal energy drain. Leo quickly turned away, his heart pounding. So a time rewind wasn't a simple do-over. It was like folding paper, creasing the past and the present together. They navigated the labyrinth of alleys and finally stopped in front of a shuttered storefront. The sign, Stardust Records, had letters missing. A strange symbol was spray-painted on the roll-down gate, vaguely resembling the lines on the gear. Marmalade tapped the gate with its paw. The usual. Time to pay up on the tuna, can time you owe me. The gate creaked open, revealing a dim interior. Moldy cassette tapes and CDs lined the shelves. An old man in a military surplus jacket sat behind the counter, examining a vinyl record with a magnifying glass. The wrinkles on his face were deeper than the grooves on the record. You're here, the old man said without looking up, his voice raspy with disuse. What have you brought me this time? A new debtor, Marmalade said, hopping onto the counter and flicking its tail at Leo. He owes the gear a lot. He wants to learn from you how to collect it. The old man finally put down his magnifying glass. His cloudy eyes turned to Leo, and he broke into a grin, revealing a nearly toothless mouth. David Miller's boy? You look just like him. Leo was taken aback. You knew my father? Knew him. The old man pulled a tin box from a drawer and dumped out a pile of yellowed photos. The time debt he owed me was 10 times what you owe now. This right here is a rare, first pressing album he traded 3 months of his youth for. This is a special lubricant for the gear he traded the memory of his first date with your mother for. In one of the photos, a young David Miller stood in front of the record store, holding an album, grinning from ear to ear. Something hit Leo in the chest, and the fragmented memories began to stir again. His dad trying to teach him to dance and stepping on his own feet. His mom pricking her finger while knitting and yelping in pain. The smell of sunshine in the attic. What happened to him in the end? The old man gathered the photos and picked up his magnifying glass again. He used his last memories to buy a temporal bubble to hide the backup gear you have now. He even set a ward on it that could only be broken by your blood. He said he couldn't let you be trapped by the gear your whole life, like he was. Leo clutched the gear in his pocket. He suddenly understood. His father hadn't left him a gift. He'd left him a choice. The choice to live an ordinary life, or the choice to bear the weight of it all. Just then, the glass door of the record store cracked with a sharp snap. The figure of the man in the black trench coat appeared outside. A pale hand emerged from the darkness of his hood and pointed at Leo. Give me the gear. The old man's face changed. He grabbed a metal rod from under the counter. It's an echo. He's been consumed so badly he's barely conscious. How'd he find this place? Marmalade's fur stood on end, and it let out a threatening hiss. He didn't follow us. He followed the gear's debt. Leo felt the gear in his pocket grow hot. The blue text flashed frantically. Time debt overflow warning. Echo is consuming ambient chronal energy. He saw the colors on the cassette tapes on the shelves begin to fade. The CD covers aged before his eyes. Even the old man's hair seemed to be turning whiter by the second. Give me the gear. The man's voice grew more distorted, as if coming from underwater. Or we all turned to temporal dust. Leo looked at the old man's graying hair, at Marmalade's arched back, and thought of the smile on his father's face in the photograph. He suddenly understood what the time debt really was. It wasn't a debt to the gear. It was a debt to the people you loved and the people who loved you. He pulled the gear from his pocket and held it tight. I'm not giving it to you. Leo's voice trembled, but his resolve was absolute. I'll pay the debt myself. The gear erupted in a blinding light, the lines on its surface spinning wildly, as if in response. The man in the trench coat let out a piercing shriek, and his form began to turn translucent. The old man's eyes lit up. He's awakening his pact. Quick, Leo. Focus. Think of the one thing you can't bear to lose. The one thing he couldn't lose? An image of Chloe's smiling face flashed in his mind. At that moment, the gear's light shot toward the back of the store, illuminating a poster on the wall. It was for a concert in 1998 featuring his dad's favorite band. And in the corner of the poster, someone had written a line in pen. Leo, remember, what time can't take away is what matters most. Chapter 5. The Pact and the Vanishing Floor. As the gear's light flooded the record shop, Leo heard a sharp crack. It wasn't the sound of breaking glass, but of something solidifying. He looked down. The man in the trench coat was dissolving in the light, turning into countless motes of energy that were slowly being absorbed by the lines on the gear. Echo, energy detected. Converted to chronal energy. Current debt balance. Minus 689 years. The moment the blue text appeared, Leo felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The cassette tapes on the shelves regained their color. A few strands of black reappeared in the old man's hair, and even Marmalade's bristling fur smoothed down. Absorbed in Echo's energy, the old man, Silas, clicked his tongue, tapping the counter with his metal rod. This kid's pact awakened earlier than his dad's. What exactly is a pact? Leo asked, rubbing his still hot palm. The gear had quieted, but a faint golden ring now encircled the nick on its edge. It's your connection to the gear, Marmalade said, hopping onto his shoulder and brushing its tail against his ear. Like an old-fashioned contract. You give it energy, it works for you. But your pact is special. It seems you can directly absorb echoes to pay off your debt. Much more efficient than trading memories like your dad did. Silas unrolled a yellowed map on the counter. Absorbing echoes won't be enough to clear your debt. See this mark? The number 3 furnace at the old Bethlehem steel yard. There's a temporal fissure there. Tonight at midnight, it will leak a significant amount of chronal energy, enough to pay off half your debt. The mark on the map was a twisted gear, identical to the one in Leo's pocket. He remembered the mysterious phone call mentioning the old steel mill warehouse, and his heart skipped a beat. Is it dangerous? Dangerous? Silas chuckled. When it comes to time, what isn't? Your dad broke 3 ribs. They're fighting off revisionists for a single time shard. He lowered his voice. But there's more than just energy there. It's where your dad hid something, chronos sand, a substance that stops the gear from consuming memories. Leo held his breath. Not consuming memories? That meant he could use the gear without forgetting his dad's smile, without forgetting Chloe's favorite things, without forgetting the moments he was desperate to hold on to. I'll go. Wait. Silas pulled a palm-sized bronze compass from a drawer. Its needle was shaped like half a gear. Take this chronometer. It will help you find the densest concentration of energy. Remember, once midnight passes, the fissure closes. If you get caught in a time stream, no one can save you. Leo took the compass, its cold metal seeping into his fingertips. He suddenly thought of his sister at the hospital. Can I use the gear to see how she is now? Marmalade's ears drooped. You can, but it'll cost you. 1 minute of viewing will cost you 1 day of your life. I'll do it, Leo said without hesitation. He gripped the gear, focusing his thoughts on Chloe's hospital room. The blue text flowed across his vision. Initiating temporal scry. Cost 24 hours of lifespan. In the next instant, the world around him changed. A white room, the smell of antiseptic. Chloe lay in her hospital bed, pale but with bright eyes, smiling at a phone screen. On the screen was a video of Leo in his high school uniform, doing a clumsy dance at a school talent show, making the audience roar with laughter. "You were such a dork, big brother," Chloe said, poking the screen, her voice weak and raspy. "Why get better? You have to do that dance for me again, okay?" Tears welled in Leo's eyes. He had secretly recorded that video. His old phone had broken, and he thought it was lost forever. Chloe had saved it all this time. "That's enough." Marmalade swatted his hand with its paw. "Any longer, and you'll be a month older." Leo snapped back to reality. The hospital room vanished, replaced by the dim record shop. He touched his cheek. It was wet. "She'll get better," Silas said, handing him a tissue. "Your dad used 5 years of his life to buy a prophecy. It said you would return with the Chronos sand and cure your sister's illness." Leo pocketed the compass and took a deep breath. "How do I get to the steel yard?" "The back door. There's an old motorcycle." Silas pointed to the alley behind the shop. "Your dad left it there. The tank's full." As Leo left the shop, the sun slanted into the alley, painting the weathered walls gold. He glanced back. Silas was already bent over his magnifying glass again, and Marmalade was curled up on the counter, napping as if the life-or-death struggle had never happened. Deep in the alley, just as Silas had said, was an old motorcycle. A small gear was etched into its red fuel tank. It was his dad's. Leo swung the leg over and kicked it to life. The engine sputtered, then roared, vibrating through his hands. "Wait!" Brenda's voice called from behind him. Leo's heart sank, expecting more trouble. But when he turned, she was running toward him, holding a plastic container. "Where have you been?" "Ms. Rodriguez came by for the rent. I told her you were at the hospital visiting your sister. I covered it for you." Leo was stunned. This was the same Brenda who would yell at him over $5. Now she was covering his rent? "What are you staring at?" Brenda shoved the container into his hands, avoiding his eyes. "My son brought home this brisket yesterday. We weren't going to eat it all. Make sure your sister eats something good." The container was still warm. As Leo held it, he remembered the video on Chloe's phone. In the background, one of the kids cheering him on was a chubby boy who looked a lot like Brenda. "Thank you, Brenda." The tips of Brenda's ears turned red. She turned to leave, but her voice floated back. "Get back here soon. The pipes in the shop are still waiting." Leo started the motorcycle, the smell of brisket mixing with the gasoline fumes. He finally understood what Silas meant by what time can't take away. It was Brenda's kindness, hidden beneath her gruff exterior. It was his father's love, hidden in sacrifice. It was the warmth you didn't always see, but was always there. The old Bethlehem steel yard was on the outskirts of the city, abandoned for nearly 20 years. As Leo rode into the complex, the setting sun cast long shadows from the blast furnaces, making them look like slumbering beasts. He followed the map to furnace number 3 and found not a warehouse, but a rusted-out elevator shaft, cordoned off with chains and a no-entry sign. "The compass is pointing down," Marmalade said, perched on the railing, its amber eyes fixed on the dark shaft. "The fissure must be underground." Leo pulled out the compass. The needle spun wildly before settling, pointing straight down. He tugged on the chains. They were loose, rust flaking off. "Be careful. They say the shaft has swallowed its share of people." Marmalade's voice was tense. "The last time I was here with you, I saw the ghosts of 1950s steelworkers floating around inside." "You were here with me before?" "Forgot." Marmalade scratched its head with a paw. "When you were 7, your dad brought you here. You insisted on exploring the shaft, got scared by bats, and came out crying. I was the one who dragged you out." A hazy image flashed in Leo's mind. A pair of warm paws pulling him up from a cold, dark place. He and Marmalade went way back. He switched on his phone's flashlight and started down the rusty service ladder. The walls of the shaft were covered in scratch marks. Some looked like they were made by human fingernails, others by animal claws. Halfway down, he saw a yellowed hiring notice pasted to the wall. The date was July 15th, 1998. the same as the date on the back of his father's photo. That was the day the Gear 1 test failed, Marmalade said grimly. They say an entire floor that didn't exist before appeared in this shaft that day. Anyone who went in never came out. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to speak, the rung beneath his feet snapped with a loud crack. He cried out as he fell. In the chaos, his hand caught on a piece of rebar sticking out of the wall. His phone slipped from his grasp, tumbling into the darkness, its light painting a brief, terrifying picture below. It was a floor that should not have existed. A massive gear was painted on the concrete, identical to the one in his pocket. A dozen figures in work uniforms stood around the painted gear, their backs to him, perfectly still. The figure in the very center wore a familiar blue jumpsuit and held a metal part in his hand. It was his father from the photograph. "Dad!" Leo called out instinctively. All the figures turned at once. They had no faces, only swirling voids of darkness, just like the man in the trench coat. "Give us the gear." 1,000 voices spoke at once, a cacophony of whispers and shrieks echoing up the shaft. Leo felt a powerful force pulling him down, his grip on the rebar slipping. Massive echo convergence detected. Energy level, catastrophic. As the blue text flashed, Leo pulled out the gear and held it tight. The lines on its surface glowed red. The figures below shrieked in pain, their bodies dissolving like smoke. But more figures emerged from the shadows of the phantom floor, a dense, writhing mass, blocking any escape. The gear in Leo's hand burned, and his vision started to go dark. His own energy was being drained. "Use the compass." Marmalade's voice cut through the shrieking. "Jam the needle into the center of the painted gear." Leo gritted his teeth and, with his last bit of strength, threw the compass. It spun through the air and landed perfectly in the center of the painted gear, the needle plunging into the concrete. A deafening hum vibrated through the shaft. The entire floor began to shake. The painted gear erupted in a golden light. As the light passed over the figures, they dissolved into motes of starlight, which were then sucked into the compass at the center. The downward pull vanished. Leo clung to the rebar, gasping for air. He looked down. In the golden light, the compass was melting, fusing with the painted gear, finally forming a fist-sized crystal that pulsed with a soft, silver light. "The Chronos sand!" Marmalade yelled excitedly. "Go get it!" Leo started to climb down, but then he saw something lying next to the crystal. It was a small tin box. Etched on the lid were the words, "For Leo." His heart leaped. He scrambled down the rest of the ladder. The floor was still warm. He picked up the tin box. Just as he was about to open it, the entire floor began to turn translucent, rippling like water. "Midnight's almost here. The fissure is closing," Marmalade urged. "Grab the sand and let's go." Leo shoved the Chronos sand in his pocket, clutched the tin box, and ran for the ladder. But the translucent floor was shrinking fast. Something grabbed his ankle. A faceless hand, emerging from the dissolving floor, held him fast. "Leave the gear," a familiar voice whispered in his ear. Leo whipped his head around. On the wrist of the hand holding him was a faded red string bracelet, identical to the one his mother used to wear. "Mom!" His strength vanished. The floor was now up to his knees. Familiar voices swirled around him. His dad's laugh, his mom's gentle admonishments, Chloe's giggles, Brenda's yelling, Silas's cough. Was this his time debt? Chronal energy critical. Host will to protect detected. Guardian protocol triggered. As the blue text flashed, the gear in Leo's pocket exploded with an unprecedented light, enveloping him completely. The hand on his ankle released him. His mother's voice, choked with tears, echoed from a great distance. "Leo, run. Don't look back." Leo gave the vanishing floor one last look, then scrambled up the ladder with all his might. The light behind him faded. He had just cleared the top of the shaft when he heard a final, definitive crack from below, as if something had shattered forever. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. The tin box was still in his hand, and the Chronos sand in his pocket emanated a faint warmth. Marmalade jumped onto his shoulder and licked his cheek. "It's okay. We got the sand." Leo opened the tin box. Inside, there was only a photograph and a slip of paper. The photo showed his dad, his mom, and a young Leo standing in front of the record shop, smiling. On the slip of paper was his father's handwriting. Leo, when you read this, you'll probably understand. The gear isn't a weapon or salvation. It's a choice. The choice to remember or to forget. The choice to bear the burden or to run from it. I chose to bear it, not because I was brave, but because I loved you and your mother. A tear fell from Leo's eye, smudging the ink. He looked up at the night sky. The stars were bright, just like the motes of light the echoes had become. Just then his phone rang. It was a blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice, cold and amused, came through the speaker. Leo Miller. Congratulations on finding the Kronos sand. Now, come to the rooftop of Mercy General Hospital. Trade it for your sister's life. It was Kincaid. Leo's heart plummeted. He looked down at the Kronos sand in his pocket, then thought of Chloe's pale face. He finally understood. The real time debt was never to the gear. It was to the people you wanted to protect. He gripped the phone, his voice steady but firm. I'm on my way. Chapter 6. The Rooftop Gambit, the motorcycle tour through the deserted pre-dawn streets, its engine a roar that startled birds from the trees. Leo pushed the throttle to its limit, the wind biting at his skin. The Kronos sand in his pocket was a small, warm pulse, like a beating heart. He clutched the tin box with a photo, his knuckles white. How does Kincaid know about the sand? Marmalade flattened itself against the fuel tank, its voice whipped away by the wind. That old fox has probably got the whole hospital locked down. Leo didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the road. The hospital loomed larger, the lights on its roof a single, cold eye watching over the city. He thought of the video on Chloe's phone, of her smiling and saying, "When I get better." The pain in his chest was sharp, like a gear grinding against bone. Maybe we should find another way in, Marmalade suggested, tapping his hand with its paw. Through the air vents. We might be able to get to Chloe first. He wants the sand. Leo's voice was grim. If I don't show, Chloe will be in danger. He knew that men like Kincaid didn't make idle threats. If Sector 7 could create augmented operatives, they wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice a single patient. He parked the motorcycle in an alley behind the hospital. He took out the Kronos sand, wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief, and tucked it into an inside pocket of his jacket. It was his only bargaining chip. You wait here, he said, stroking Marmalade's head. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, go find Silas at the record shop. Like hell. Marmalade's fur bristled. I'm coming with you. Every time her dad got into trouble, who do you think cleaned up his mess? Before Leo could argue, Marmalade had leaped into the front pocket of his jacket, leaving only its furry head poking out. Stop wasting time. Let's go. The hospital corridors were eerily silent, the only light coming from the green glow of the emergency exit signs. Leo avoided the security guards, taking the fire stairs. On the 13th floor, he heard voices. It was Kincaid. What's his position? Just enter the rear entrance. Should be on the roof in 10, another voice replied. The subject, Chloe Miller, is prepped. If he tries anything, we inject this stasis agent. Stasis agent? Leo froze, his blood running cold. It's a drug that slows down the flow of time within the body. Marmalade hissed from his pocket. On the surface, it stabilizes the patient's condition. In reality, it turns her into a chronal energy vessel. If activated, she could absorb all the temporal energy for miles around. They're monsters. Leo gritted his teeth, his nails digging into his palms. He pushed open the stairwell door. The 13th floor ward was empty, except for two men in black suits standing guard outside Chloe's room, earpieces in their ears. He moved silently along the wall. As he passed the nurse's station, he saw a medical chart on the desk with Chloe's name on it. The diagnosis had been crossed out and rewritten in red ink. Compatible chronal vessel, designation 73. So, from the very beginning, their target was more than just the gear. A cold rage filled Leo. He took a deep breath, slipped out a window in the stairwell, and began to climb the exterior drain pipe. The cold metal bit into his hands, but he couldn't stop. Every second he delayed was another second of danger for Chloe. The wind on the roof was strong, nearly knocking him off his feet. Kincaid stood at the edge, his back to Leo, tossing a small silver sphere in his hand, the same kind of time shard container Thorne had used. You have more patience than your father, Kincaid said, turning around, his robotic eye glowing in the dark. When he came to save your mother, he didn't even wait to negotiate. Just detonated half a case of chronal explosives. Where's my sister? Leo's hand went to his jacket, his fingers brushing the handkerchief-wrapped sand. Safe, for now, Kincaid said, gesturing to a large metal door nearby. Hand over the chrono sand, and I guarantee she'll live out her natural life in peace. Why should I believe you? Because of this, Kincaid tossed a USB drive to him. This contains Sector 7's highest directive. With the chrono sand, anyone connected to the gear will receive temporal amnesty. In short, you'll no longer be hunted by the time dead. Leo caught the drive. Its cold metallic feel was a sharp dose of reality. He knew it was likely a trap, but he had no other choice. I want to see my sister first. Kincaid smiled and pressed a button on a remote. The metal door slid open. Chloe was lying on a hospital bed inside, paler than before. And Foreline ran into her wrist, and the fluid in the bag was a strange, murky gray. Chloe! Leo started to run toward her, but two men in suits blocked his path. Not so fast, Kincaid said, weighing the silver sphere in his hand. Give me the sand. Leo pulled out the handkerchief. Just as he was about to hand it over, Marmalade leaped from his pocket, hissing at Kincaid. He's lying. That USB drive is a temporal tracker. The moment you plug it in, Sector 7 will be able to locate everyone who's ever come into contact with the gear. Kincaid's face darkened, the red light in his eye growing brighter. Dumb gut. He pressed a button on the sphere. A volley of tiny silver needles shot out, aimed at Marmalade. Without thinking, Leo pulled the cat to his chest, taking the needles in his back. A numbing pain spread through him. Now, Chloe, on the bed, opened her eyes and struggled to sit up. Don't move. Kincaid aimed his gun at the bed. One more twitch, and the drug in that will put her to sleep permanently. Leo could feel the numbness spreading from his back. He gritted his teeth and held up the chrono sand. Let my sister go, and it's yours. Now you're being sensible. Kincaid's smile returned. Toss it over. Leo's hand trembled. He knew that if he handed it over, not just him and Chloe, but everyone connected to the gear would become a pawn for Sector 7. His father's sacrifice, Silas's help, Marmalade's loyalty, it would all be for nothing. Just then, the gear in his pocket grew hot. The blue text flashed. Host will to protect detected. Authority elevated to 5%. Temporal swap unlocked. Temporal swap? An idea sparked in Leo's mind. He looked at the gun in Kincaid's hand, then at the Foreline in his sister's wrist. His heart pounded. Catch! He threw the chrono sand, not at Kincaid, but toward an open ventilation duct at the edge of the roof. Kincaid cursed and dove for it. In the instant his back was turned, Leo focused all his will on the gear and yelled inwardly, swap. Temporal swap initiated. Targets: Kincaid's pistol and Chloe Miller's Foreline. Cost: 3 months of lifespan. As the blue text vanished, something bizarre happened. The gun in Kincaid's hand transformed into an 4-tube, while the 4-tube in Chloe's wrist morphed into a pistol, clattering to the floor. What? Kincaid froze, staring at the plastic tube in his hand, his face a mask of fury. Leo seized the opportunity. He kicked aside the men blocking his path, scooped Chloe off the bed, and ran. Chloe, let's go. Leo, you're back. Chloe's, I'm okay. Leo gritted his teeth and sprinted for the door. Marmalade had already leaped onto Kincaid's shoulder, clawing at his robotic eye. Get off. Kincaid roared, throwing the cat off. He snatched the chronos sand from the ground and yelled into his radio. Activate the chrononet. Don't let them escape. The entire hospital began to shake. The lights in the corridor flickered wildly. Gear-shaped patterns appeared on the walls, writhing like living snakes. It's the chrononet. Marmalade scrambled back into Leo's arms, its voice filled with fear. They've set up a temporal field around the hospital. Once it's active, time inside will loop infinitely. We'll be trapped here forever. Leo ran down the fire stairs, Kincaid's shouts and gunshots echoing behind him. He didn't dare look back. On the 13th floor, he saw the clock at the nurse's station spinning backward, from 3 a.m. to 5 p.m. the previous day, then to noon the day before. The world was unraveling. I'm scared, Leo. Chloe clung to him. Don't be. I've got you. Leo kissed her forehead. The numbness in his back was getting worse, his vision blurring. We're almost out. He knew he was at his limit. The temporal swap had drained more than just his lifespan. It had drained his strength. Just as he was about to collapse, the stairwell door burst open. Brenda stood there, holding a mop. Behind her was Silas from the record shop. "Now, this way," Brenda yelled, using the mop to trip one of the pursuing agents. "Silas? What are you doing here?" Marmalade exclaimed. "If I didn't come, you stupid cat would be full of holes by now." Silas threw something that looked like a grenade to Leo. "Catch. It's a temporal concussion charge. It can blast a temporary hole in the field." Leo caught it, pressed the button, and threw it down the stairwell. A massive explosion rocked the building. The gear patterns on the walls vanished, and the lights returned to normal. "Go. That will only hold for 5 minutes." Silas pushed him toward the back door. "How about the motorcycle waiting in the alley?" Brenda followed behind, yelling as she ran, "You kids are nothing but trouble. After this is over, you're fixing every pipe in my store for the next 3 months." Leo looked at her and was suddenly reminded of how his mom used to yell at his dad. A fierce bark, but always followed by quiet tears when he was hurt. The motorcycle was waiting in the alley. As Leo settled Chloe onto the seat, Silas grabbed his arm. "Take this." It was the tin box with his father's photo, but inside was a small metal plate, engraved with the words Kronos Guard. "It's a guard sigil." Silas's voice was grave. "Take it to the old clock tower on the west side. Your father left one last thing for you there. Remember, no matter what, don't let the gear fall in his Sector 7's hands." Leo clutched the tin box and nodded. He started the engine. Brenda shoved something into his hands, the container of brisket. "For the road," she said, turning away, her voice thick with emotion. "Take care of your sister." As the motorcycle pulled away, Leo glanced back. On the hospital roof, Kincaid was a dark silhouette, the Kronos sand in his hand glinting coldly. Chloe leaned against his back, her breathing steady now. Marmalade was perched on the fuel tank, licking its paws. "Where to now?" "The clock tower." Leo gripped the handlebars, looking toward the first light of dawn. To the clock tower. He knew this wasn't the end. Kincaid wouldn't give up. The revisionists were still out there. The echoes were still hungry. But he wasn't the helpless kid hiding in the back of a hardware store anymore. He was David Miller's son. He was the guardian of the Kronos gear. He was his sister's brother. The sun broke through the clouds, reflecting off the motorcycle's mirror. In it, Leo saw his own face superimposed over the memory of his young father's. And he smiled. He finally understood. Being a hero wasn't about becoming strong in the eyes of others. It was about finding the courage to protect the ones you loved most. And what final secret had his father left for him in the old clock tower? Chapter 7. The Clock Tower's Echo. Mist still clung to the cobblestone streets of the old west side when the motorcycle rolled to a stop. The air was damp, and ivy crawled up the sides of the old brick buildings. Leo slowed the bike, the engine's rumble sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. Marmalade lifted its head from the fuel tank, its amber eyes scanning the surroundings. Something's not right. It's too quiet. It was true. There were no sounds of morning deliveries, no one walking their dog. Only the whisper of wind through the trees and the hum of their engine. "I'm cold, Leo." Chloe snuggled deeper into his jacket. She was still pale, but looked much better. He'd ripped out the strange for a line back at the hospital, leaving only a small mark on her wrist. "Almost there," Leo said, his gaze fixed on the old clock tower at the end of the street. It was more dilapidated than he'd imagined. Bricks were missing from the walls, and the clock face was covered in a thick layer of grime, its hands frozen at 3:17, as if forgotten by time itself. "This is it." Marmalade hopped off the bike, pawing at the tower's iron gate. "It's locked. Looks like it hasn't been opened in years." Leo helped Chloe off the bike and let her rest against the wall. He approached the gate. The lock was an old brass one, covered in intricate patterns, similar to the ones on the tin box. He took out the metal plate Silas had given him, the Kronos Guard sigil. He inserted it into the keyhole. It was a perfect fit. With a gentle turn, the lock clicked open. "Well, I'll be," Marmalade said, its tail twitching. "Your dad was better at hiding things than he was at anything else." A wave of musty air hit them as they pushed open the gate. The inside was dark, the only light filtering down from skylight far above, illuminating a spiral stone staircase covered in a thick layer of dust completely devoid of footprints. No one's been here recently, Leo said, relieved. He was about to help Chloe up the stairs when she tugged on his arm. Her face was as white as a sheet. She pointed into the darkness. Leo, there's someone up there. Leo's heart leaped into his throat. He clutched the gear in his pocket and followed her gaze. At the top of the stairs, a shadowy figure stood with its back to them, perfectly still. Who's there? He called out, the gear in his pocket beginning to warm. The figure didn't move. Marmalade arched its back and hissed. It's an echo. A strong one. High concentration chronal residue detected. Energy signature match. David Miller. The blue text made Leo's whole body go rigid. His father's echo? He took a deep breath and slowly started up the stairs. Dad, is that you? The figure slowly turned around. It was a man in a blue jumpsuit, his build identical to his father's in the photograph. But where his face should have been, there was only a swirling vortex of darkness. Yet somehow, Leo felt that it was looking right at him. Did you bring the gear? The man's voice was a strange overlay of his father's, but hollow and inhuman. Leo instinctively touched his pocket. I did. Do you have something to tell me? Tell you. The figure began to flicker like a bad TV signal. Time is running out. He raised a hand and pointed to the wall next to the staircase. Leo looked over. One of the bricks was a slightly lighter color than the others. Inside, something. The man's voice faded, his form growing more translucent. Protect. Chloe. As the last words dissipated, the figure dissolved into motes of light, which were then absorbed by the gear in Leo's pocket. The lines on the gear glowed briefly, then returned to normal. Leo stood frozen, his eyes burning. Was that his father's last remnant? What had he hidden in the wall? Don't just stand there. Marmalade nudged him with its head. See what's in the wall. Leo shook himself out of his stupor and went to the wall. The lighter-colored brick was loose. He pried it out easily, revealing a hollow space behind it. Inside was a black metal box about the size of a shoebox, covered in the familiar gear pattern. Leo lifted it out. It was heavy. What is it? Chloe asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Leo opened the box. Inside was a silver key and a thick, leather-bound notebook. The key was strangely shaped, as if made of a multitude of tiny, interlocking gears. A number 7 was engraved at its head. The notebook's cover was worn, and on it, written in pen, were the words Guardian's Log. Key number 7. Marmalade's eyes went wide. I know what this is. It opens the Chronos Guard's secret armory. It's full of chronal energy crystals and gear parts. Your dad searched for it for 3 years and never found it. He hid it here. Leo ignored the cat. It was his father's. He opened it to the first page. The date was March 12th, 1997. Calibrated gear, 3 today. Energy output stable, but still experiencing memory loss. Brenda said I've been forgetful lately. Even got her son's birthday wrong. Need to find a solution. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Brenda? His dad knew Brenda back then? He kept reading. The log detailed his father's work with the gear, the challenges he faced, his love for his wife, his hopes for his young son. Halfway through, a passage made him stop. July 15th, 1998. Gear 1 went critical. The revisionists are here. I hid the backup gear in a temporal bubble, sealed with a ward made from Chloe's umbilical cord blood. Only her family can open it. I hope Leo never has to. Dr. Finch said the heart of the gear is a temporal core, hidden in Sector 7's headquarters. If someone ever tries to use the gear to destroy the world, key number 7 must be used to open the armory and retrieve the countercore to destroy it. But the price is that all timelines altered by the gear will be reset, including the existence of Leo and Chloe. It must never be used, except as a last resort. Leo's hand tightened, wrinkling the page. Temporal core? Countercore? Resetting the timeline? It meant that if he used the countercore, he and Chloe might just disappear, as if they had never been born. What's wrong? Chloe sensed his distress and tugged on his sleeve. Nothing, Leo said, closing the notebook and forcing a smile. We found something that can make you better. He placed the key and notebook back in the box. As he was about to close it, he noticed a small line of text engraved on the bottom. The clock's pendulum holds the second temporal anchor. A temporal anchor? He remembered that term from when the gear first activated. Let's go to the top, he said, picking up his sister. Dad might have hidden something else in the pendulum. At the top of the tower, the morning mist had burned off, and sunlight streamed through the skylight, illuminating a massive brass pendulum. It was covered in a green patina, but the intricate gear patterns were still visible. Leo examined it closely and found a small keyhole at its base, a perfect match for key number 7. "Try it," Marmalade urged. Leo hesitated, then inserted the key. With a gentle turn, the pendulum clicked and began to swing. As it swung, the entire tower began to vibrate. The walls lit up with the blue, gear-like patterns, and the clock hands, frozen at 3:17, began to move backward. "What's happening?" Chloe clung to his neck. Second temporal anchor activated. Synchronizing with main gear, as the blue text flashed, a hidden compartment popped open on the back of the pendulum. Inside was a small glass vial filled with a silvery white powder. It looked like the Chronos sand, but purer. "It's pristine Chronos sand," Marmalade yelled, practically bouncing with excitement. "It's 10 times more powerful than the other stuff. With this, you can cure your sister without ever having to deal with Sector 7. Leo's heart pounded. He reached for the vial, but the door to the roof burst open. Kincaid and a dozen soldiers in black tactical gear stormed in, their guns aimed at him. "Miller, put it down." His robotic eye glowed. And behind him, in a white lab coat, was Dr. Finch. "It seems we arrived just in time," Dr. Finch said, adjusting his glasses, his eyes filled with greed. "Pristine Chronos sand. Enough to fully awaken the Chronos gear. We won't just be able to change the past. We'll be able to create entirely new timelines. Aren't you a revisionist? What are you doing with Sector 7? Marmalade spat. "The ends justify the means," Dr. Finch smiled. "This alliance is temporary. Once the gear is awakened, these grunts will be obsolete." Kincaid's face tightened, but he said nothing. Leo shielded Chloe with his body, clutching the vial. "You're not getting it. Don't be a fool." Kincaid stepped forward, his eye flaring. "Stasis agent, chronal vessel. I know what your cures look like. Then we'll take it by force." Kincaid waved his hand. "Get him. Alive." The soldiers closed in. Leo knew he couldn't fight them all. He looked at the swinging pendulum, then at the vial in his hand. An idea formed. He threw the vial at Dr. Finch. "Here, you can have it." Dr. Finch's eyes lit up, and he reached for it. Just as his fingers were about to close around the vial, Leo pressed a specific line on the gear, a failsafe he'd read about in the log, designed to detonate stored energy. Initiating chronal detonation. Target: pristine Chronos sand. Cost: 1 year of lifespan. Boom. The vial exploded in Dr. Finch's hand. The silvery powder erupted in a massive sphere of light. Time inside the sphere seemed to warp. Dr. Finch's scream slowed to a crawl, his face frozen in terror. His body aged decades in seconds, his hair turning white, his skin wrinkling, until he collapsed, a mummified corpse. "You're insane." Kincaid staggered back, his robotic eye flickering wildly. "Open fire. Turn him into Swiss cheese." As the guns fired, Leo grabbed Chloe and dove for the hidden compartment behind the pendulum. The wall there had been cracked by the explosion. He slammed his body against it, and it crumbled, revealing a narrow, steep maintenance shaft leading down. "Jump!" He pushed Chloe in first, then followed. Marmalade landed neatly on his shoulder. Kincaid's furious shouts and the sound of gunfire echoed from above. Bullets whizzed past his head. He didn't look back, just held on to Chloe and slid down, the light at the end of the shaft growing brighter. Just as he was about to emerge, something wrapped around his wrist. It was a metal wire dangling from the ceiling of the shaft, a small, blinking device attached to its end. "Got you." Kincaid's voice echoed from above, cold and triumphant. "That's a temporal lock. It will freeze the chronal energy in your body. Enjoy being stuck in this moment forever." The wire tightened. Leo felt the blood in his veins turn to slush. His body grew rigid and became hard to breathe. His vision blurred. He could hear Chloe crying his name, but her voice sounded distant. Chronal energy forcibly frozen. Authority dropping rapidly. Host will to survive detected. The blue text flickered erratically. The lines on the gear grew dim. Leo's consciousness began to fade. He saw his father's face, his mother's smile, Chloe telling him his dancing was dorky. "I can't stop here." With his last ounce of strength, he bit his own lip hard. A drop of blood fell onto the gear. Guardian blood detected. Emergency protocol triggered. Authority temporarily elevated to 10%. Temporal leap unlocked. A powerful force surged from the gear, snapping the metal wire. Leo felt a weightlessness as the world twisted and spun. He held Chloe tight as he was propelled through the light at the end of the shaft. When his feet hit solid ground, he was standing at the entrance to the old street, the sun shining, people walking by as if nothing had happened. The maintenance shaft entrance was gone, leaving only a crack in the wall. "Did we escape?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. Leo nodded. A sharp pain shot through his back. He'd been shot. The bullet was still inside him. "Now, you're bleeding." Chloe burst into tears. "It's okay, it's just a scratch," he started to say, but then his face went pale. The gear was gone. In the chaos of the temporal leap, it must have fallen. He whipped his head around and looked up at the clock tower. Kincaid was standing at the top, holding the familiar bronze cog high in the air, his robotic eye glinting in the sun. He had the gear. Leo's heart sank. Without the gear, how could he fight Sector 7? How could he cure Chloe? How could he pay back the time debt? Just then his phone rang. It was Silas. "Kid, you lost the gear. Don't panic. Get to the shop. I have something to show you. The most important thing your father left behind, besides the gear itself." Leo clutched the phone, looked up at Kincaid on the tower, then down at his crying sister. He took a deep breath. He still had people to protect. "Chloe, we're going to the record shop." The sun cut through the eaves of the old buildings, casting dappled light on the street. Leo held his sister and walked forward, his shadow stretching long behind him. He didn't know what Silas had for him, but he knew this game of cat and mouse with time was far from over. Chapter 8. The secret in the vinyl to roll down gate of Stardust Records was only halfway up. Leo had to duck to get inside, holding Chloe, nearly tripping over a stack of cardboard boxes. The shop was even dimmer than before, the curtains drawn tight. A few old desk lamps cast yellow circles of light on the floor. Silas sat behind the counter, gently wiping a vinyl record with a pair of tweezers. An old record player sat beside him, its horn dusty. "You're here," Silas said without looking up. He placed the record on the turntable. "Have a seat." These old bones moved slow. Chloe looked around with curiosity. The shelves were neatly packed with tapes and CDs, their plastic cases yellowed with age, but meticulously clean. Posters of old bands and singers Leo didn't recognize adorned the walls. "You said my dad left something else?" Leo gently set Chloe down in a wicker chair. The wound in his back throbbed, and a fresh wave of sweat broke out on his forehead. "What's the rush?" Silas cranked the handle on the record player and lowered the needle. A gentle piano melody filled the room, a tune that felt familiar, like something his mother used to hum. "Your dad, that kid, he loved hiding things. Hid the most important thing right here in this shop and never even told me. I only found out after his echo visited me in a dream." Amidst the soft crackle of the vinyl, Silas pulled a metal filing cabinet from under the counter and unlocked it. Inside were not jewels or cash, but a dozen wooden boxes, labeled with years from 1995 to 2003. "Time capsules," Silas said, picking up the box labeled 1998 and blowing the dust off. "Your dad hid one every year. Said he wanted you to see what his life was like when you grew up." Leo's heart skipped a beat. 1998, the year the Gear 1 test failed. He took the box. It was surprisingly light. Inside was a single vinyl record and a folded letter. The record's sleeve had no text, only a hand-drawn gear, identical to the one he'd just lost. "This record, don't touch it," Silas snapped, his tweezers darting out to gently lift the record. "That's not an ordinary record. It's a chronal medium. Your dad forged it with 3 years of his own memories. If you touch it with your bare hands, it'll drain your energy." Leo snatched his hand back as Silas placed the record on the turntable. When the needle dropped this time, there was no music, only the static hiss of a dead radio station. "Why is there no sound?" Chloe whispered. "It needs a key," Silas said, pulling a small metal sliver from his pocket. It was shaped like half a gear, the Kronos guard sigil Leo had lost at the hospital. Silas had retrieved it. He pressed the metal sliver against the record player's horn, and something magical happened. The static vanished, replaced by his father's voice, young and vibrant, slightly out of breath, as if he'd just been running. Leo, when you hear this, I might already be gone. Don't be sad. In my life, I got to meet your mother, and I got to have you and Chloe. That's more than enough. Tears welled in Leo's eyes. It was his father's voice. July 15th, 1998. The day Gear 1 went critical. I had a chance to run, but I saw that old bastard Finch trying to remove the temporal core. If the revisionists got their hands on that thing, it would have leveled half the city. I had no choice but to initiate the self-destruct and shatter the core. They all thought the core was destroyed. It wasn't. I secretly saved the largest fragment and embedded it in this record. This fragment can locate the other pieces. If you can find them all, you can build a pseudo-core. It won't be as powerful as the original, but it'll be enough to deal with those Sector 7 thugs. And Kincaid, you have to be careful of him. He's a double agent. He's been working for the revisionists all along. He's the one who tipped off Finch about Gear 1. He doesn't want the gear for Sector 7. He wants to be the king of time himself. Chloe's illness. I'm so sorry, sweetie. To save your mother, I used too much of my own energy, and it affected you. But I found a cure. In the temporal fissure at the old steel yard, there's a plant called a reverse time. It only blooms once every 300 years, and this is the year. Remember, when you harvest it, you must use pure silver shears. Don't let it touch any other metal. And one last thing. His father's voice caught a mix of a laugh and a sob. Leo, don't be like me. The Chronos Guard doesn't protect time, it protects people. If you ever get tired, just put all down. Take care of Chloe and live a good life. That's more important than anything. The record let out a final, piercing screech, and the voice stopped. The needle had carved a white line in the vinyl, leaving a small nick. The shop was silent, except for Chloe's muffled sobs. Leo clenched his fists, the pain in his back a dull echo of the ache in his heart. His father knew everything. He had foreseen all of this, even Kincaid's betrayal. Reverse time, Leo whispered. If I go to the steel yard now, is there still time? It'll be tight, Silas said, carefully placing the record back in its box. Now that Kincaid has the gear, he'll be able to sense the core fragment too. And the reverse time must be picked at midnight. It's already afternoon. I'm going, Leo said without hesitation. Even if there's only a 1 in a million chance, I have to try. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Silas glared at him. Your back needs to be treated. Kincaid's men are probably all over the city. You'll be spotted the moment you step outside. I have a plan, Leo said, his eyes landing on the cardboard boxes by the door. Brenda's hardware store isn't far. She has a delivery truck. He was cut off as a roll-down gate was kicked open. Sunlight streamed in. Kincaid stood in the doorway, the lost gear in his hand, a cold smile on his face. Leo Miller. Don't bother. Hand over the core fragment, and I'll make your death quick. Leo's heart sank. How had he found them? You old fool. You're good at hiding. Kincaid's gaze swept over Silas, then landed on the metal cabinet. Give me all the time capsules, or this shop, and your old bones will be your tomb. Silas slowly stood up, the metal rod from before appearing in his hand. You want to touch my shop? You'll have to get through me first. You're asking for it. Kincaid waved his hand, and his men raised their guns. Don't. Leo stepped in front of Silas. The fragment is on me. Let them go, and I'll go with you. Now. Chloe screamed, try to run to him, but Marmalade held her back. A wise choice, Kincaid smiled. Toss it over. Leo reached into his pocket. He'd pocketed the record while Silas was talking. He held it, the pain in his back making his vision swim. I can't give up. He looked at the record player, then at the metal rod in Silas's hand. A desperate plan formed in his mind. You can have the fragment, Leo said, slowly raising the record over his head. But you have to promise me one thing. Let my sister go. Kincaid's robotic eye flickered. Deal. He waved his hand, and 2 agents started toward Chloe. Leo's heart was in his throat. Just as they were about to reach her, he threw the record, not at Kincaid, but at the record player. Silas now. The record shattered against the machine. The core fragment inside erupted in a blinding blue light. Time in the shop froze. Kincaid's smile froze on his face. The agent's movements halted mid-stride. Even the dust motes hung, suspended in the air. Only Leo and Silas could move. Go! Silas pried, opened the back window with his rod. These old bones can hold them for a while. Remember the steel yard, 3rd sublevel of furnace number 3. That's where the reverse time is. Leo scooped up Chloe, Marmalade already on the windowsill. He glanced back. Silas was pushing records off the shelves, each one exploding in a flash of blue light, trapping Kincaid and his men in a cage of frozen time. Thank you. Leo gritted his teeth and jumped out the window. The back alley was narrow and damp. He ran, holding Chloe, his back bleeding freely, soaking his shirt. He could hear the explosions from the shop and Kincaid's enraged roar as the time lock broke. Leo, you're bleeding so much. Chloe's tears were hot on his neck. I'm okay, he gasped, turning into another alley. We're going to Brenda's. She can help us. He didn't know if Silas would make it, if Kincaid would follow, if the reverse time even existed. But he had to run. He reached the back door of Reliable Hardware just as his vision went black. Brenda was taking out the trash. She saw him and dropped the can with a clatter. Good Lord, what happened to you? She rushed over and saw the blood on his back, her eyes instantly turning red. Was it that bastard Kincaid? I knew he was no good. Brenda, Leo's voice was faint. Please, take us to the steel yard. What do you go to that godforsaken place for? She helped him inside, pressing her apron to the wound. You need a hospital. You're going to bleed to death. Chloe's cure. It's the only place. His consciousness was fading. Please. Brenda looked at the sobbing Chloe in his arms, then at Leo's pale face. She bit her lip. Wait here. She ran into the back and came out a few minutes later with a first aid kit and a set of car keys. I'm locking up. We're going now. My husband used to work at the mill. He told me how to get to the 3rd sublevel. Leo felt a wave of relief as his world went completely dark. The last thing he heard was his father's voice from the record. Leo, don't be like me. Live a good life. But Dad, some responsibilities you can't run from. When Leo woke up, the car was already in the steel yard. The setting sun painted the derelict buildings a fiery red. Brenda was at the wheel, muttering curses under her breath. Chloe was asleep on his shoulder. You're awake? Brenda glanced at him and handed him a bottle of water. Midnight's in half an hour. We have to hurry. Leo sat up. His back had been bandaged, and the pain had subsided to a dull ache. He looked out the window. The silhouette of furnace number 3 grew larger in the twilight, like a silent, waiting beast. Brenda, thank you. Don't thank me, she said, turning her head away. Your dad helped my son out of a jam once. I'm just paying back a debt. Leo remembered his father's log. Brenda said I've been forgetful. He suddenly understood. In the memories consumed by the gear, there was so much hidden kindness. The car stopped at the base of the furnace as the moon rose. Leo woke Chloe. Brenda got a flashlight and a pair of silver shears from the trunk. They were pure silver. Down the elevator shaft. There's a ventilation duct on the 3rd level that will get you in. Brenda pointed to the shaft where Leo had fallen before. I'll wait up here. If there's trouble, whistle. 3 short, 1 long. Got it. Leo nodded and took the shears and flashlight. You be careful. He carried Chloe to the edge of the shaft. Marmalade had already jumped down and meowed from below. Leo took a deep breath and started down the ladder. The walls were damper than before, covered in moss. On the 3rd level, just as Brenda had said, there was a ventilation duct just big enough to crawl through. It's dark, Leo. Chloe's voice trembled. Don't worry, I'm here, he said, crawling in first. The duct was filled with dust and cobwebs. The flashlight beam revealed scratch marks on the walls, similar to the ones he'd seen in the clock tower. After about 50 feet, the duct sloped downward and they slid out, landing hard on the floor below. Leo winced in pain and shone the light around. It was a huge underground space, like an abandoned laboratory, filled with rusted equipment. In the center was a circular stone platform, and on it a strange plant was growing. Its leaves were silver, and it was topped with a single blue flower, its petals glowing faintly. The reverse time, Marmalade yelled. Hurry, it's almost midnight. Leo was about to go to it, but then he froze. Next to the platform, with his back to them, stood a man in a white lab coat. It was Dr. Finch, but he was dead. How would he be here? Dr. Finch slowly turned around. His face was blank, his skin a waxy pale, his eyes glowing a sickly green. I knew you would come, Leo Miller. His voice was like rusted metal scraping. I'll be borrowing that reverse time. Leo's heart was in his throat. He gripped the silver shears. But you're dead. Dead. Dr. Finch laughed, the sound echoing in the vast space. I have long since converted myself into a chronal energy composite. As long as there is temporal energy, I can regenerate indefinitely. You, on the other hand, without the gear, what hope do you have? He raised a hand. The equipment in the lab whirred to life. A multitude of metal cables shot out, striking like vipers toward Leo. Leo grabbed Chloe and ran, the cables whipping past his back and shredding a piece of equipment into scrap metal. You can't escape, Dr. Finch advanced, his green eyes glowing brighter. Give me the reverse time, and I'll make your sister's death painless. Never. Leo hid Chloe behind a large machine. You won't lay a finger on her. He held the silver shears, knowing he was no match for him, but refusing to back down. The wound in his back began to bleed again, and his vision swam, but he knew he couldn't fall. Just then, the lab door burst open. Kincaid and his men rushed in, their guns aimed at Dr. Finch. You old bastard. Dr. Finch's face darkened. Kincaid, you want a piece of this too? The reverse time is mine. Kincaid's robotic eye glowed. I have the gear. Only I can unlock its true potential. As they faced off, neither noticed the reverse time on the platform begin to glow brighter. It was midnight. This was his chance. While they were distracted, Leo crept behind the platform, raised the silver shears, and cut the plant at its base. Stop! Finch and Kincaid roared in unison, lunging at him. The moment the shears cut the stem, the reverse time erupted in a brilliant blue light. The entire lab began to shake. Leo felt a powerful energy surge through him. The pain in his back vanished. His mind was flooded with images. His dad in the lab, calibrating the gear. His mom, smiling at him from her hospital bed. Chloe, healthy, running in the sun. Brenda's son in his school uniform, waving at him. Silas in the record shop, wiping a record. Were these the memories consumed by the gear? When the blue light faded, the reverse time was gone. All that was left were a few drops of blue liquid on the silver shears. Finch and Kincaid were stunned. Where is it? Finch shrieked, lunging at him. Leo instinctively blocked with the shears. The moment Finch's hand was about to touch him, the blue liquid on the shears exploded, forming a protective barrier. Finch slammed into it and screamed in agony, his body dissolving like it was being eaten by acid. No! His screams faded as he melted into a puddle of black goo on the floor. Kincaid staggered back, his robotic eye fixed on the shears in Leo's hand. What did you do to him? Leo was just as shocked. The liquid had that much power. Reverse time energy detected, fusing with host's bloodline. Authority elevated to 20%. Temporal purification unlocked. The blue text explained everything. It was the power of the reverse time. It didn't just cure. It purified corrupted chronal energy. Kincaid seemed to understand. His face twisted with greed. Give me the shears, or I'll kill your sister. He spun around, grabbed Chloe as she ran out from behind the machine, and pressed his gun to her head. Chloe! Leo's heart seized. Drop the shears. Kincaid's voice was crazed. Or I'll pull the trigger right now. Chapter 9. The resonance of shears and gear. The cold barrel of the gun pressed against Chloe's temple, but she didn't cry. She just stared at Leo, her big eyes wide, her small hands clenched at her sides. There was no fear in her gaze, only trust. She was a blade of grass in a storm, unbending. Leo's heart felt like it was in a vice. Cold sweat soaked the bandages on his back. His hand, holding the silver shears, trembled, not from fear of Kincaid, but from the terrifying possibility of making one wrong move. Drop the shears. Kincaid's robotic eye glowed, his finger on the trigger. I'll count to 3. 1. Don't you touch my brother. Chloe suddenly yelled, throwing her small body backward. Caught off guard, Kincaid stumbled, the gun wavering for a fraction of a second. It was all the time Leo needed. Moving on pure instinct, he lunged, the silver shears scything through the air toward Kincaid's wrist. The glowing blue liquid on the blades made contact, and Kincaid screamed as if he'd been burned, his hand flying open. Chloe scrambled away and into Leo's arms. Kincaid clutched his wrist, which was now smoking, his robotic eye flickering wildly. The energy of the reverse time. You've fused it with your bloodline. Leo shielded his sister, holding the shears defensively. He could feel the blue light from the blades flowing into him, resonating with a power deep inside. The energy from the plant, harmonizing with the remnant of his father's will. You think this is a victory? Kincaid suddenly laughed, pulling the gear from his pocket and holding it aloft. I have the gear, so what if it's bonded to you? I can force it to obey. He bit his own thumb and smeared blood across the gear surface. The bronze cog erupted in a blinding red light, its lines spinning manically. The lab equipment began to shake, and spiderweb cracks spread across the walls. Warning: non-compatible user force-activating gear. Chronal turbulence detected. The blue text flashed frantically. Leo felt a crushing weight on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The gear was unleashing a storm of raw temporal energy, and it felt like 1,000 invisible knives slicing at his skin. Feel this power. Kincaid's body seemed to swell in the red light, his clothes tearing as gear-like patterns appeared on his skin. This is the true meaning of time. I will reshape the world, and you so-called guardians will be nothing but dust. He slashed his hand through the air, and a beam of red energy shot toward Leo. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, but Leo twisted, pulling her out of the way. The beam hit a machine behind them, and the solid steel melted like ice cream, releasing a noxious smell. You can dodge once, but can you dodge forever? Kincaid advanced, firing beam after beam. Give me the power of the reverse time. I'll let you be my second in command. We can rule time together. Leo scrambled between the machines, holding Chloe tight, the wound in his back tearing open again. He knew he couldn't keep this up. He had to get the gear back. Leo, use that. Chloe suddenly pointed at Kincaid's feet. It was the metal container Dr. Finch had left behind, still humming with residual energy. Leo's eyes lit up. He dove, kicking the container at Kincaid. It exploded in a flash of white light as it collided with the gear's red aura. Kincaid was thrown back, and the gear in his hand faltered, its red light dimming. You're dead. Kincaid roared, tossing the gear into the air. It hovered, shooting out a web of red light that descended upon Leo. Authority 20%, temporal shield triggered. Leo instinctively raised the silver shears. The blue light flared, forming a protective dome. The red web hit the shield and sizzled like water on a hot skillet. How is this possible? Kincaid stared in disbelief. How is your authority so high? Leo was just as surprised. He could feel the shears absorbing the red light from the gear, the blue barrier purifying the chaotic energy, turning it into a gentle warmth that flowed into his body, mending his wounds. It's the reverse time. Marmalade's voice was filled with excitement. It's purifying the gear's corruption. Your dad could never figure out how to do that, and that's why the gear consumed his memories. It all clicked into place. His dad's log mentioned the chrono sand could stop memory loss, but it needed the energy of the reverse time to be activated. Impossible. I'm the chosen one. Kincaid screamed, lunging for the hovering gear. It's mine. Just as his hand was about to close around it, the gear chimed, a clear, pure note. The red light vanished completely, transforming into a stream of energy that shot toward the silver shears in Leo's hand. No. Kincaid let out a cry of despair. The moment the gear connected with the shears, blue and bronze light intertwined, forming a spinning sphere. A warm current washed over Leo, and the fragmented memories he had lost returned in a flood. His dad's calloused hands teaching him how to fix a bike chain. His mom's gentle eyes as she knitted him a sweater. Chloe's first mumbled bro. Even Brenda, sneaking an extra piece of chicken into his lunch. All the moments he thought were gone forever were back, as vivid as if they had happened yesterday. When the light faded, the gear was fused to the head of the silver shears, creating a unique weapon. The blue and bronze lines flowed over its surface, as if alive. Kincaid collapsed to the ground. The red light in his robotic eye had gone out, revealing an empty socket. Without the gear's power, he had aged decades in an instant. Why? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Leo walked over to him, the sheer gear in his hand. Because you wanted to control time. I just want to protect the people I care about. Kincaid opened his mouth to say something, but then his eyes closed, and his body dissolved into motes of light, fading into the air. He never understood that the gear's true power wasn't in destruction, but in preservation. The tremors in the lab subsided. Leo carried Chloe to the stone platform. The sheer gear chimed again, and a single drop of blue liquid formed on its surface. The essence of the reverse time, Marmalade said, hopping onto his shoulder. Give it to your sister. Leo carefully let the drop fall into Chloe's mouth. It dissolved instantly. Color returned to her cheeks, and her breathing became deep and even. The exhaustion vanished from her eyes. Leo, I don't feel sick anymore, she said, her smile like the sun after a storm. Tears welled in Leo's eyes. He hugged her tight, all the pain and exhaustion melting away. I did it, Dad. The lab door opened, and Brenda ran in, holding a steel pipe. Now, are you two okay? I heard a huge ruckus. She saw Chloe, safe and sound, and let out a long breath, the pipe clattering to the floor. Her own eyes were red. Thank God. You're okay, Brenda. Thank you, Leo said, his voice thick with gratitude. Don't thank me, she said, wiping her face and instantly reverting to her usual self. Let's get out of this dump. I'm making brisket when we get back. You both need it. Leo nodded and followed her out, carrying Chloe. As he left, he glanced back at the empty lab. The sheer gear in his hand felt warm, as if in response to some unspoken thought. He knew it wasn't over. Sector 7 wouldn't give up. The revisionists might still be out there. The timelines still needed mending. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had the sheer gear, a healthy sister, Brenda's brisket, Silas's records, and a noisy cat. Most importantly, he had his memories back, the warmth that would carry him through whatever came next. As they left the steel yard, the sun was rising, casting long shadows from the furnaces. Chloe was asleep in his arms, a small smile on her face. Where to now? Marmalade yawned. Leo looked at the sunrise and tightened his grip on the sheer gear. Home. Home to the place with rent to pay, pipes to fix, his sister's laughter, and the simple, messy business of living. As for the secrets hidden in the cracks of time, the debts still unpaid, they could wait. After all, sometimes protecting the ordinary is the most extraordinary thing a person can do. A new, tiny marking had appeared on the gear, where it fused with the shears. It looked like a flower just beginning to bloom. What new secret did that hold? Chapter 10. The new guy on the block's sunlight sliced under the rising gate of reliable hardware, painting a golden stripe across the dusty concrete floor. Leo walked in, Chloe asleep on his back. Brenda was on a step stool, changing a light bulb. Without looking down, she grumbled, Look what the cat dragged in. The pipes under the sink have been leaking all night. The floorboards are starting to warp. Get to it. The tone was the same as always, but to Leo, it sounded like a welcome home. He gently laid his sister on the cot in the back room, covered her with a blanket, and picked up his toolbox. On it, Marmalade hopped onto the counter, drooling at a shelf of canned tuna. Brenda saw it, slapped a $5 bill on the counter. Go get yourself a couple cans from the corner store. My treat. Bro. Marmalade snatched the bill and vanished out the door. Leo knelt by the leaking pipe, his wrench moving with practiced speed. As the water flow stopped, he instinctively touched his lower back. The sheer gear was wrapped in cloth, hidden under his shirt, its gentle warmth a comforting presence against his skin. How's Chloe? Brenda asked, nearly tripping as she stepped off the stool. Leo caught her just in time. Sleeping soundly. She has more color in her cheeks, Leo smiled. Thanks to you. Save it, Brenda said, turning away, though the tips of her ears were red. Ms. Rodriguez is coming for the rent this afternoon. I covered you for now, but you owe me. Just as Leo was about to thank her again, the bell on the door chimed. An old man in a gray, perfectly pressed suit walked in. His hair was impeccably combed, and he leaned on a mahogany cane. His eyes were sharp as a hawk's, scanning every corner of the store. Can I help you? Brenda asked, her tone more subdued than usual. This man didn't look like he was here for nuts and bolts. The old man ignored her. His gaze landed on Leo, and then, with unnerving accuracy, on the spot on his lower back where the sheer gear was hidden. A knowing smile touched his lips. Young man, I need to borrow a wrench. Leo's heart skipped a beat. He gripped the wrench in his hand. The man's gaze was unsettling, as if he could see right through his clothes. High purity, chronal energy, fluctuation detected. Identity unknown. Danger level moderate. The blue text flashed and vanished. Leo calmly stood and handed the wrench over. Here you go. The old man took it, his fingers brushing Leo's. A faint static charge passed between them. Leo knew instantly. This man was one of them, and his power was more refined than Kincaid's. Thank you, the old man said, weighing the wrench in his hand. He suddenly asked, I hear you paid a visit to the old steel yard a few days ago. Leo's body tensed. Who told you that? The echoes are whispering all over the city. The old man placed a wrench on the counter, his cane tapping the floor. Someone used a reverse time to purify the gear's corruption and destroyed Kincaid's power source. Quite impressive. Brenda, who was holding a glass of water, froze. She slowly sidled over to Leo, a rusty machete appearing in her hand from under the counter. Who are you? Leo's hand went to his back, ready to draw the shear gear. Relax, the old man smiled, pulling a small black notebook from his pocket. The cover was embossed with a golden gear, similar to the one on his father's log. I'm with the Temporal Bureau. The name's Chin. The Temporal Bureau? Leo had never heard of it. We regulate people like you, chronal agents, Chin said, putting the notebook away. With Kincaid's defection and Dr. Finch's death, Sector 7 and the revisionists are in disarray. The city's timeline is unstable. We need someone to clean up the mess. His gaze fell on Leo's back again. The shear gear you possess is currently the only tool capable of stabilizing temporal fissures. Come with me. Help the Bureau fix a few loose ends, and you'll be well compensated. No, Leo refused without a second thought. I just want to take care of my sister. Don't be so hasty, young man. Chin's voice hardened. You think you're safe hiding in this hardware store? Kincaid's loyalists are still looking for you. Not to mention the independent time hunters who specialize in hunting down people who possess artifacts like yours. He took a photo from his pocket and placed it on the counter. This was found on the east side 3 days ago. An old woman who possessed a time shard. A hunter drained her, and now she's an echo. The woman in the photo was blurry, her body translucent. It was Mrs. Gable. Leo's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms. I help you with your problems. You help me with mine, Chin said, taking back the photo. A fair trade. Brenda slammed the machete on the counter. Who do you think you're scaring? Our Leo isn't going anywhere. What are you going to do about it? Chin glanced at her, and the coldness in his eyes made her take an involuntary step back. But she quickly puffed out her chest again. You want to start something? You start it with me. Brenda, Leo stopped her. He looked at Chin. I have conditions. I am listening. First, you don't touch my sister or Brenda. Leo's voice was firm. Second, I'll help stabilize the fissures, but I'm not joining any organization. Third, when the job is done, you provide me with enough chronal energy crystals to permanently cure my sister. Chin stared at him for a long moment, then broke into a smile. Interesting, just like your father. It's a deal. He unscrewed the head of his cane and produced a small metal cylinder. This is a temporal beacon. It will glow whenever there's a fissure nearby. Tonight at midnight, there's a small one at the old docks. You handle that, and we'll consider our partnership begun. Leo took the cylinder. Its cold, smooth feel was a dose of reality. It was similar to Silas's chronometer, but more advanced. Don't try anything funny, Chin said, turning to leave. My people are nearby. If you run, I won't run, Leo cut him off. But if you betray me, I promise you'll regret it. Chin paused at the door, then left without another word. The bell chimed, and the store was quiet again. Brenda finally let out a breath, her knees buckling. That old man, he's terrifying. Leo didn't respond, just turned the cylinder over in his hand. He knew that agreeing to Chin's offer meant his quiet life was over. But the photo of Mrs. Gable was a thorn in his heart. He couldn't let innocent people suffer just so he could have peace. Leo, are you really going to go? Brenda asked, her voice filled with worry. Yeah, he said, putting the cylinder away. Don't worry. I can handle it. A small noise came from the back room. Chloe walked out, rubbing her eyes. She saw Leo and ran to him, hugging his legs. Leo, I'm Festi. I'll get you some water, he said, picking her up, his heart filled with a fierce, protective love. He would do anything to make sure she could live a life where her biggest problem was being thirsty. The afternoon sun moved across the floor. Leo peeled an apple for Chloe. Brenda did her accounting. Marmalade napped on a box of tuna. The occasional customer came in, their haggling a normal, everyday sound. Leo took it all in and remembered a line from his father's log. The most precious time is the time you can afford to waste. He looked at his sister, at Brenda, and felt the weight of the shear gear under his shirt. Whatever was waiting for him at the old docks tonight, he wouldn't back down, because he wasn't just protecting the people in front of him. He was protecting this time that was precious enough to waste. As the sun began to set, the metal cylinder on the table began to glow, a soft green light pointing west. Midnight was approaching. Chapter 11. Whispers at the old docks. The midnight wind carried the scent of salt and decay, whipping small waves against the rotting pylons of the old docks. Leo had the shear gear tucked into the back of his belt, the temporal beacon from Cheen glowing in his hand like a small green lantern. The docks were deserted. Rusted tin roofs groaned in the wind, and the ground was littered with torn fishing nets and splintered crates. Leo moved quietly, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Beacon says it's just ahead," he murmured into the tiny microphone clipped to his collar, another one of Cheen's gadgets. He'd wanted to bring Marmalade, but Brenda had insisted the cat stay behind to guard the store. After 100 yards, the beacon's light began to flash, pointing toward a half-submerged shipping container. The container door was slightly ajar, and a strange purple light seeped from the crack, along with the faint sound of voices. Leo crept to the side of the container and listened. "If it doesn't stabilize soon, the timeline in this whole area is going to collapse," an old voice said. "Where is that kid? Did that old man Cheen lie to us?" "Relax," a younger voice replied. "The Temporal Bureau values punctuality. If he said midnight, he'll be here at midnight." "Punctuality doesn't fix a fissure," the old voice grumbled. "Back when your grandfather and I guarded these docks, we didn't need all these fancy gadgets. A good wrench was all it took to knock a rogue time stream back in line." Leo's brow furrowed. The voice was familiar. It sounded like Mr. Henderson, the old man who ran the clock repair shop down the street. He gently pushed the door open and peered inside. Two figures sat on an old tarp. One was a white-haired old man, polishing a rusty wrench. The other was a young man in a jumpsuit, holding a red version of Leo's beacon. It was Mr. Henderson. Leo used to watch him work when he was a kid. The old man could fix any broken watch, and rumor had it he used to be a foreman at the docks. "Mr. Henderson," Leo said, stepping inside. The old man looked up, his eyes widening. "Well, I'll be. Lao, what are you doing here? Did old man Cheen send you?" "You know me?" Leo was surprised. "Your dad used to bring you by my shop all the time," Mr. Henderson grinned, revealing a mostly toothless mouth. "You were only about this high, always staring at the cuckoo clock." The young man laughed. "So, you the new guy Director Cheen told us about?" "I'm Mark, Temporal Bureau, 3rd Division. Mr. Henderson is a consultant. He knows the time streams in this area better than anyone." Leo then noticed the strange equipment in the corner. Green waveforms danced on the screens. The purple light was coming from behind the equipment, where the air shimmered as if in a heat wave. Through the shimmer, he could see the faint image of another dock. Women in old-fashioned dresses, rickshaws rolling by. It was a scene from decades ago. "It's a temporal fissure," Mark explained. "These docks have been rebuilt 3 times, and each time it messed with the timeline. A rift opened up this afternoon. If it gets any bigger, it'll start pulling in the surrounding neighborhood." Mr. Henderson sighed. "I tried the old way. Didn't work. The new time streams are too delicate. They need your newfangled tools." Leo pulled out the shear gear. The moment he touched it, he felt a faint vibration. It was resonating with the fissure. "Director Cheen said your gear could stabilize it?" Mark's eyes lit up. "Quick, try it. My equipment is about to overload." Leo walked to the shimmering air and took a deep breath. He remembered his father's words from the log. "Time is like water. It's better to guide it than to block it." He raised the shear gear and slowly channeled his energy into the fissure. The gear began to turn with a soft click, its blue light flowing into the purple haze. The distorted air began to calm. The images of the old-fashioned women and rickshaws faded like a receding tide. The waveforms on the screen stabilized. "It's working," Mark exclaimed. But Mr. Henderson squinted. "Wait, there's still a small pocket." Before he could finish, the fissure violently contracted. A powerful suction pulled at Leo, nearly dragging him in. Mark grabbed his arm. Mr. Henderson swung his wrench with surprising force, slamming it into a metal support beam next to the fissure. Clang! The fissure shuddered, then sealed completely. The purple light vanished. Leo gasped for air, his back drenched in sweat. The shear gear was burning hot, its lines glowing and fading as if it were breathing. That was close, Mark said, wiping his forehead. That fissure had a lingering will attached to it. When they tore down the old docks, a rickshaw driver was waiting to pick someone up. He waited for decades. His will was so strong, it kept the fissure from closing. Mr. Henderson put down his wrench, his eyes distant. His name was Chun. I knew him. His daughter was supposed to arrive on a ship that sank. He came here every day to wait for her, until the day he died. Leo touched the hot gear. He finally understood why Cheen had sent him. The gear wasn't just a tool. It was a resonator, able to hear the stories hidden in the cracks of time. Oh, right. Mark handed him a small box. Director Cheen said, "This is your first payment." Inside was a translucent crystal, like frozen moonlight. It was warm to the touch. A chronal energy crystal. With this, he could get more of the medicine Chloe needed. When they left the container, the sky was beginning to lighten. Mr. Henderson clapped Leo on the shoulder. "You use that gear well, son. With time, you have to remember what needs remembering and forget what needs forgetting. That's how you walk a straight path." Leo nodded, watching the eastern sky turn a pale gray. The wind from the docks no longer smelled of decay, but of fresh grass. He clutched the box with the crystal and started for home. He knew this was just the beginning, but the thought of his sister's smile, of Brenda doing her accounts, made the path ahead feel solid and real. At the entrance to the docks, he glanced back. In the morning light, the half-submerged container looked like an old man guarding a secret. He thought he saw the faint image of a rickshaw driver wave, then dissolve into the dawn. "Goodbye," Leo whispered. Some stories had to end, and his was just beginning. Chapter 12. The scent of medicine in the morning light the sky was a soft gray when Leo got back to the hardware store. Brenda was asleep behind the counter, her head resting on her account book. Marmalade was curled at her feet, its tail twitching with each breath. He quietly went to the back room. Chloe was sleeping soundly, her cheeks rosy. Leo placed the chronal crystal on the nightstand. It caught the morning light, glowing softly. "Now," Chloe's eyes fluttered open. "You're awake?" he said, taking her hand. "Go back to sleep. It's still early." "Where did you go?" she mumbled. "I dreamed you were taken away by shadows." "I want to get you a treat," Leo said, gently tweaking her nose. He showed her the crystal. It sparkled in the light, casting tiny rainbows on the wall. Chloe sat up, her eyes wide. "It's sparkly. Like candy. Even better than candy," Leo smiled, putting the crystal away. "Later, I'll have Brenda make you some scrambled eggs." When he came out, Brenda was awake, yawning. "You're back. Everything go okay?" "It was just a small fissure," Leo said, pouring a glass of water. Mr. Henderson was there. He helped a lot. Old man Henderson. Brenda raised an eyebrow. "He used to run the docks with an iron fist. I can't believe he's still meddling in this stuff." She lowered her voice. "Did Cheen give you any trouble?" "I don't trust that man." "Not yet," Leo said, taking a sip of water. "He gave me this." He placed the crystal on the counter. Brenda's eyes went wide. "Is that a chronal crystal? Your dad searched his whole life and never found one this big." "Old man Cheen is generous. He called it a first payment." "The Temporal Bureau must be desperate," Brenda said, rubbing her chin. "But you be careful. Those time management types are shifty. Your dad used to say they treat chronal energy like currency, and their loyalty changes just as fast." Leo nodded. He didn't mention the story of the rickshaw driver, or the fragmented memory that had flashed in his mind when the shear gear had gotten hot, an image of his father holding him as a small child, standing on the docks, smiling at a rickshaw driver. "Oh, right." Brenda rummaged in a drawer and pulled out a paper bag. "Ms. Rodriguez dropped this off when she came for the rent. Said a woman in a lab coat asked her to give it to you." Leo opened the bag. Inside was a small bottle of pills with a label that read, "For Chloe." Under the bottle was a note, written in elegant script. "I noticed your sister's unique constitution at the hospital. This is a specially formulated supplement to help with her recovery. One a day with water. Dr. Evans," it was Dr. Evans from the hospital. She had saved Chloe's life during her last attack. A warmth spread through Leo's chest. I need to thank her. First things first, Brenda said, pointing out the window. Look who's here. Leo looked. Sheen was standing in front of the shop, leaning on his mahogany cane, a small smile on his face. The sunlight on his suit made him look almost gentle. What's he doing here? Brenda was instantly on guard, her hand reaching for the machete under the counter. Leo stopped her. I'll handle it. He stepped outside. Sheen looked him up and down and nodded. Not bad. Your first time handling a fisher, and you did it cleanly. You're better than your father was at your age. You knew my father? Knew him. Sheen chuckled, tapping his cane. 30 years ago, on these very docks, your father used nothing but a wrench to fix a timeline that was about to collapse. He was younger than you then, with a broken piece of a gear in his pocket, just like you. Leo was stunned. His father had never told him any of this. The sheer gear you have now, your father entrusted it to me. Sheen's gaze grew distant. He told me to give it to you if he was ever gone. He said the Miller family was born to keep time on the right path. My dad, he was a hero. Sheen cut him off, his voice filled with respect. 5 years ago, he exhausted all his energy to stabilize a major temporal event on the west side. He became an echo, but he didn't die in vain. That area has been stable ever since. Leo's throat fell tight. So his dad hadn't just disappeared. He had. What are you crying for? Sheen clapped him on the shoulder. Your dad hated to see boys cry. He left you the gear, but not so you could live in the past. He pulled out another notebook, this one brown, with a gear embroidered on the cover. This is the second half of his log. It details the fishers he handled. It might be useful to you. Leo took the log. It felt heavy in his hands. You're off duty today, Sheen said, turning to leave. Read the log. And by the way, Dr. Evans is an affiliate of the Bureau. You can trust her medicine. She and your father were old friends. As the old man's figure disappeared down the street, Leo noticed a small letter C embroidered next to the gear on the log's cover. He went back inside. What did he say? Brenda asked. Leo opened the log. The first page was filled with his father's familiar handwriting, next to a clumsy drawing of a little girl. Chloe learned to walk today. She fell 3 times and cried like a kitten. He smiled, but his eyes were wet. Leo, look at me. Chloe's voice came from the back room. He looked up. Chloe was on her feet, holding onto the doorframe, slowly walking toward him. Her face was red with exertion, but she was grinning, showing off 2 newly sprouted teeth. Easy there. Leo rushed over to her, his heart pounding. The crystal and Dr. Evans's medicine were working. The morning light streamed through the window, landing on Chloe's smiling face, on Brenda humming as she did her accounts, on Marmalade's twitching tail, and on the log in Leo's hand. He could almost hear his father's voice, gentle and strong, from the pages. Leo, time is not meant to be chased. It is meant to be protected. He gripped the sheer gear, looked at his sister, and felt a sense of clarity. No matter how many fishers lay ahead, as long as he had these people, this morning, and the faint scent of medicine in the air, he could face anything. Chapter 13. The old map in the log the afternoon sun created a golden lattice on the floor of the back room. Chloe sat at a small table, humming as she colored with crayons. Leo sat nearby, immersed in the second half of his father's log. The pages were yellowed and brittle. The first half was filled with everyday details. The date Chloe first said Dada, the 3rd sweater his mom had messed up while knitting, even a note about Brenda's son breaking a jar of pickles. Leo smiled as he read. The days blurred by the gear were filled with so much quiet warmth. About halfway through, the handwriting became rushed and frantic. September 7th, 2018. The fisher at the West Side warehouse expanded again. It's a shadow of a 1943 munitions factory. Took 3 hours to stabilize. 30% chronal energy depleted. Dr. Evans says if I keep this up, my memories won't last another year. Found an old map. It marks a temporal spring at the old South Side Church. Legend says its water can repair chronal energy damage. I'll check it out tomorrow. A temporal spring? Leo had never heard of it. He kept reading. The next few pages were filled with detailed sketches of the old church. The bell tower supports, the crypt's ventilation shafts, even the dimensions of the priest's fireplace. Taped to the last page was a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline was illegible, but he could make out the words, 1943 South Side Church explosion. No survivors. Leo, look what I drew. Chloe held up her drawing. It was a lopsided stick figure holding a sparkly star. Doesn't it look like your sheer gear? Leo took the drawing. Chloe, do you know the old church on the south side? The one with the pointy roof. Chloe tilted her head. Brenda says it's full of spiders and I'm not allowed to go there. Brenda came in with a bowl of cherries. That old church should have been torn down years ago. There was a fire there 10 years back that left nothing but the frame. Now it's just a hangout for homeless people. Why would you want to go there? Dad's log says there's a temporal spring there. Leo showed her the clipping. Brenda squinted at it. I think I remember this. My dad was a firefighter. He said that fire was strange. It was a wooden building, but it burned for 3 days and nights and then just went out on its own. The old-timers used to say there was something unholy buried under it. Leo's gaze fell on the sketch in the log. The location of the crypt's ventilation shaft was circled in red with a small note. The spring is where the cross's shadow falls. Requires Gear's blood to activate. I want to go see it. Are you crazy? Brenda slammed the bowl of cherries on the table. That place is bad news. Besides, Cheen hasn't given you a new assignment. Why go looking for trouble? Dad lost his memories because of chronal energy depletion, Leo said, pointing to the log. If the temporal spring is real, I might be able to recover his echo. He couldn't forget the faceless figure in the clock tower, or his last words, protect Chloe. Brenda opened her mouth to argue, but then just sighed. If you have to go, be careful. She grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from a shelf. This one's waterproof. And take that sheer gear with you. Don't pick any fights you can't win. Just then, the phone rang. Brenda answered. Her expression grew grim. It was Dr. Evans, she said, hanging up. She has a strange patient at the hospital. His skin is hard as wax, and he's secreting a silvery fluid. None of the equipment works near him. She thinks it's chronal contamination and wants you to take a look. A silvery fluid? Just like the goo Dr. Finch had melted into. I'll go to the hospital. The church can wait. Leo stood up and ruffled Chloe's hair. Be good. I'll be back soon. Be careful, Leo. Chloe stood on her tiptoes and patted his hand like a little adult. Outside the emergency room, a small crowd had gathered. Dr. Evans was waiting for him at the end of the hall, her eyes red-rimmed. You're here, she said, pulling him toward an isolation ward. The patient is a homeless man. He was found this morning outside the old church. He was still breathing when they brought him in, but now, she pushed open the door. The man on the bed was a grotesque sight. His skin was a waxy, gray color, and his arms were covered in silvery patterns, identical to the ones on the gear. His face was twisted in a silent scream, and a silvery fluid trickled from the corner of his mouth. He's been delirious. Dr. Evans handed him a digital recorder. Listen. She pressed play. A raspy, broken voice filled the room. The spring is open. So many hands grabbing me. The gear, blood, the spring, the old church. Leo walked to the bed. The sheer gear at his back grew hot, its lines glowing. The man on the bed began to convulse, the silvery patterns on his skin flashing, more fluid pouring from his mouth. High concentration chronal contamination detected. Source, temporal spring leakage. The spring was leaking. This man had been contaminated. Can you save him? Leo asked. Dr. Evans shook her head. His organs are failing rapidly. I've tried everything. Leo, is this related to the fissures your father used to handle? Leo thought of the log. 1943 munitions factory shadow. Was the spring connected to the explosion? Dr. Evans, can you do me a favor? Leo said, gripping the sheer gear. I need to go to the old church. Can you pull the archives on the 1943 explosion? I'm on it, she said without hesitation. Be careful. If the spring is really open, the chronal energy levels there will be dangerously high. As Leo left the hospital, he glanced back at the isolation ward. In the sunlight, he thought he saw the man on the bed lift his head, his face a blurry image of the priest from his father's log. What new mystery was this? Chapter 14. The cross in the crypt, the spire of the old Southside church, was a rusted nail against the bruised twilight sky. Leo stood before the ivy-choked gate. He pushed. It didn't budge. He took out the sheer gear. The blade tip slipped into the lock, and with a soft click, the rusted mechanism gave way. A wave of mildew and burnt wood washed over him as he stepped inside. The church was a skeleton. Weeds grew waist-high between the crumbling walls. The stained glass windows were gone, and slivers of the setting sun pierced the gloom, mottling the floor with light and shadow. The altar was half collapsed, a crucifix leaning askew, its figure's face blackened by fire. Dad's log said the spring is in the crypt. Leo consulted the sketch and went behind the altar. A loose flagstone revealed a dark opening and a steep flight of stone stairs. He switched on his flashlight. Just as he started down, a flurry of bats burst from the darkness, and he stumbled back. Pathetic, Marmalade, who had stowed away in his backpack, leaped out and shook its fur. "I'll scout ahead." It disappeared into the opening, and a moment later, its meow echoed up. "Coast is clear. Smells awful, though." Leo descended into a spacious crypt filled with burnt crates and rotting fabric. The air smelled of sulfur. The flashlight beam revealed smoke stains and bullet holes on the walls. It was definitely connected to the 1943 explosion. Over there, Marmalade flicked its tail at a wall. A rusted crucifix was mounted on a square stone slab. Leo remembered the log. The spring is where the cross's shadow falls. His flashlight cast a distorted shadow of the cross on the opposite wall. The tip of the shadow landed on a single, discolored floor tile. He pried it up with the shear gear. Beneath it was a metal plate etched with a gear pattern, with a depression in the center that perfectly matched the gear on his weapon. Found it. He fitted the shear gear into the depression and turned. With a low rumble, the wall behind the crucifix slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. A wave of frigid air and the sound of running water flowed out. "Is that the spring?" Marmalade first stood on end. Leo's heart pounded as he stepped into the passage. After about 30 feet, it opened into a circular stone chamber. In the center was a 10-foot-wide pool of black water, shimmering with a silvery film. A stone pillar rose from the center of the pool, a red crystal embedded at its top, pulsing with a faint red light. "This is the temporal spring." Leo frowned. Why was the water black? And it had a faint, metallic smell, just like the fluid from the contaminated man. He was about to step closer when the shear gear vibrated violently. "Warning. Anomalous chronal energy detected. Spring water is contaminated. Contains high concentration of ecotoxin." Contaminated? The black water churned, and a multitude of pale hands shot out, clawing at the edge of the pool. Shadowy figures in tattered military uniforms rose from the water, their faces blank save for hollow eye sockets. They were echoes. They're soldiers from 1943. Marmalade shrieked. "This isn't a temporal spring. It's an echo graveyard." The figures surged toward Leo. He retreated, the shear gear creating a blue barrier. But there were too many of them. The barrier flickered, and the red crystal on the pillar pulsed faster. "It's that crystal!" Marmalade yelled. "It's drawing them." This wasn't a spring. It was the remnant of a temporal core from the explosion, corrupted by the will of the echoes, turned into a beacon for them. His dad had found the right place, but he hadn't known it had been corrupted. "I have to destroy that crystal." Leo gritted his teeth and charged. The echoes swarmed him, their cold hands grabbing at his arms. He felt his own energy draining, but he didn't stop. He could almost see his father's back, walking through a sea of echoes, a gear in his hand. "I'm coming, Dad." He plunged the shear gear into the red crystal. Blue and red light collided in a blinding flash. The echoes shrieked as they dissolved. The pillar cracked, and the chamber began to crumble. "Run! It's coming down." Marmalade scrambled for the exit. Leo turned to follow, but an echo in a priest's robe grabbed his ankle. "Save them!" Its voice was like static. "The bomb. It wasn't us. The 1943 explosion wasn't an accident." A huge chunk of the ceiling broke loose, hurtling toward the priest. Leo shoved him out of the way, but his own leg was caught under the falling rock. "Go!" The priest's form flickered and dissolved, its last gaze on Leo. The shear gear exploded with light, lifting Leo, pulling him from the collapsing chamber just as the entrance was sealed by rubble. He collapsed in the crypt, his leg throbbing. The blue light of the shear gear faded. A small cross was now etched onto its surface. "Are you okay?" Marmalade nudged him frantically. "I'm fine," Leo said, his mind reeling. The priest's words, the contaminated spring, the explosion. What was the secret behind it all? He pulled out his father's log, but the last few pages were water-damaged, The ink bled into illegibility. Only one line was clear. The spring's contamination is linked to the revisionists. They're searching for... The rest was a blur. The revisionists again. What were they looking for? His phone rang. It was Dr. Evans. Leo, did you find the spring? Her voice was urgent. I found the archives. The 1943 explosion wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately detonated a munitions cache. And that person might have been your grandfather. Leo's mind went blank. The log slipped from his hand. His grandfather? The kind, smiling old man who loved to play chess? Connected to an explosion 70 years ago? The crypt suddenly felt much colder. Chapter 15. Grandpa's old chessboard. The cold of the crypt had seeped into Leo's bones. His leg ached. He struggled to sit up. It was pitch black outside. Marmalade was nudging him. You still haven't called Dr. Evans back. The cat's voice was laced with worry. Do you believe what she said? About your grandpa? Leo didn't answer. His grandfather, Arthur Miller, had died when he was 10. All he remembered was a kind old man in a faded cardigan, sitting under the oak tree in the backyard, the gentle click-clack of chess pieces his constant companion. He couldn't square that image with a saboteur. Let's just get out of here, he said, pulling himself up. Back at the hardware store, Brenda was dozing behind the counter, an old radio, playing softly. She woke with a start when he came in. Are you okay? That doctor called, said something about your grandpa. I'm fine. Leo cut her off. Is Chloe asleep? Just got her down, Brenda said, handing him a mug of warm ginger tea. We can talk tomorrow. Get some rest. He went to the back room. Chloe was sleeping peacefully. He sat by her bed, stroking her hair. He remembered his grandpa, giving Chloe piggyback rides around the yard, yelling, "Giddy up, horsey." Could that man have been a saboteur? The next morning, Leo went to his grandfather's old house. A young couple lived there now, but they let him into the backyard. The oak tree was still there, bigger now. The stone table underneath it was the same, a chessboard carved into its surface, a small letter, A, etched in the corner. Leo ran his fingers over the grooves of the board. He remembered his grandpa teaching him to play, his patience when Leo had thrown a tantrum and scattered the pieces. Easy, Leo, his grandpa had said. Chess is one move at a time. Life is one step at a time. You can't rush it. Your grandpa used to sit there for hours, a neighbor said, passing by with a basket of laundry. Just staring at that board. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Do you know where he got it? Brought it back with him when he was young, I think, the woman said. My husband said your grandpa used to be a janitor at the old church. After it blew up, he came back with that tabletop. A janitor at the church? Leo knelt and examined the board again. In a corner, there was a tiny, almost invisible etching of a cross, identical to the one in the crypt. He pressed the tip of the shear gear into the etching. With a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open beneath the tabletop. Inside was a faded cloth bundle. His heart pounding, he unwrapped it. Inside was a yellowed notebook and a tarnished brass pin, engraved with the words Salvation Army and a small cross. The Salvation Army, a charity organization that had been active near the church in 1943, later rumored to be part of the resistance. He opened the notebook. The handwriting was his grandfather's. May 12, 1943. More wounded soldiers at the church today. Father Michael said we have to hide the munitions in the crypt to keep them from the Japanese. I helped carry the crates, full of grenades. My hands were shaking. July 8, 1943. The Japanese are closing in. Father Michael told me to take the children and run. He's staying behind to move the munitions. I don't want to go, but he gave me this pin and said it was my duty. July 9th, 1943. The church exploded. I watched from the hills, the fire lighting up the sky. Father Michael never made it out. They all call me a deserter. But I saved 5 children. That has to be enough. Leo's hands trembled. The rest of the notebook was about raising the 5 children. The last page had a single line. My son David keeps asking about the church. I can't tell him. Some debts you have to take to the grave. Tears blurred his vision. His grandfather wasn't a saboteur. He was a hero. He'd saved 5 children and been branded a coward for it, living out his life in silence, guarding his secret. The echo of the priest in the crypt must have been Father Michael. The bomb. It wasn't us. Had the explosion been something else? His phone rang. It was Cheen. I pulled your grandfather's file. Cheen's voice was grave. He was a janitor at the church in 1943 and a member of the Salvation Army. On the day of the explosion, he escaped with 5 orphans. He was posthumously awarded the Temporal Guardian's Medal of Honor, the Bureau's highest honor, given to ordinary people who save lives during temporal events. His grandfather was a guardian, too. One more thing, Cheen said. Dr. Evans found traces of the revisionist signature in the fluid from that homeless man. They knew the spring was corrupted. They were waiting for something to mature. Waiting for what? The red crystal. And Cheen's voice grew heavy. We're detecting a massive energy spike from the old church. It could trigger a widespread temporal collapse. I need you to go back and destroy the source of the contamination permanently. Leo gripped the shear gear. He had to go back, not just for the Bureau, but for his grandfather, for Father Michael, and for all the lives lost in that fire. As he left the old house, he looked up at the sky. He could almost see his grandfather sitting under the oak tree, smiling at him. One step at a time, Leo. He would keep walking. With his grandfather's chessboard, his father's log, and his sister's smile, he would unravel this mystery, one step at a time. Chapter 16. The corrupted spring this time, Leo returned to the church with 3 things: his grandfather's notebook, the shear gear, and a machete Brenda had insisted he take. Marmalade perched on his shoulder, its tail rigid. "Don't touch anything," Leo whispered as they descended into the crypt. Cheen said the contamination is at critical mass. If it blows, half the city's timeline goes with it. I know. Marmalade licked its paw. The wall slid open with a grating screech. The stench that hit them was 10 times worse than before. The chamber beyond was a nightmare. The spring water was a thick, dark red, and the surface roiled with the fragmented bodies of echoes, all of them reaching for the central pillar. The red crystal at its top pulsed with a sickening, bloody light, and at the base of the pillar, a figure was huddled. He wore the black uniform of the revisionists. Half his body had melted into a silvery sludge that dripped into the spring. He was still alive. He looked up at Leo, his face a ruin. "They made me do it," he gasped, his eyes fixed on Leo. "The crystal, it's about to mature. You have to destroy it, a revisionist? Had there been a mutiny? Don't trust him." Marmalade shrieked. "He's injecting something into the water." A clear tube ran from the man's wrist into the base of the pillar. A dark purple fluid was flowing through it, turning the spring water an even deeper red. "It's a catalyst," Leo remembered from his father's log. "It force matures a chronal crystal, but magnifies the contamination tenfold." He charged, but the spring erupted. A massive metallic hand, covered in silvery scales, shot out of the water, its talons aimed at his face. It was a mutated echo. Leo dodged, slicing the hand off at the wrist with the shear gear. The severed hand writhed on the ground, then dissolved into a swarm of silver insects that vanished into the cracks in the floor. The revisionist at the base of the pillar laughed, a horrible, gurgling sound. "Too late. The crystal is resonating. You'll all become its fuel." He ripped the tube from his wrist. The purple fluid sprayed into the water. The chamber shook, and the red crystal shrieked. The echo fragments on the surface began to coalesce into a massive, shadowy form. Chronal amalgam forming. Danger level. Extinction. Extinction level? Use your grandfather's notebook, Marmalade yelled. The cover has the cross on it. Leo pressed the notebook against the shear gear. The cover burst into a golden flame. The words from the pages lifted into the air, forming a swarm of tiny golden crosses that rained down upon the spring. Is this a Salvation Army purification rite? The golden crosses hissed as they hit the red water, dissolving the echo fragments. The shadowy amalgam roared in agony, its form flickering. The revisionist stared in disbelief. Impossible. The Salvation Army's right. He was cut off as a tendril from the amalgam, snatched him, and dragged him into the spring. Now, Marmalade yelled, pointing at the red crystal. Destroy it. Leo poured all his energy into the shear gear. The blue light of the gear and the golden light of the notebook merged into a single, brilliant blade. He leaped, plunging the blade deep into the heart of the crystal. There was a moment of absolute silence, then a deafening explosion of red and gold light. The shockwave threw Leo against the far wall. In the blinding light, he saw the spirits of the echoes rise from the spring. They were no longer monstrous. They bowed to him, then dissolved into starlight. One of them, in a priest's robe, was Father Michael. He smiled and mouthed the words, "Thank you." When the light faded, the crystal was gone. Leo collapsed, his grandfather's notebook at his feet, its cover now faded, the pages brittle as ash. He thought he saw his grandfather and his father, standing in the distance, smiling at him. When he woke up, he was lying on the ground outside the church. Sheen was standing over him, holding a scanner. The screen showed a stable green line. "The energy levels are back to normal," Sheen said, his expression unreadable. "Your grandfather's notebook, its cover was made from the last of the Salvation Army's holy relics. No wonder it could purify the ecotoxin." Leo sat up. "The revisionists, will they be back? They lost their most valuable catalyst. They won't be making a move anytime soon," Sheen said, handing him a small metal plaque, engraved with the words, "Temporal Bureau, Special Consultant. This is for you. You can, of course, refuse." Leo looked at the plaque, then at the fragile notebook in his hands. He smiled. "I think I prefer fixing pipes." Sheen chuckled. "As you wish. But I'll still be calling you the next time there's a fissure." As Leo left the church, he glanced back. In the sunlight, the ruined building seemed at peace, its spire a gentle curve against the blue sky. Chapter 17. The new neighbor Leo spent 3 days in the hospital. Dr. Evans diagnosed him with coronal energy exhaustion and a mild concussion. Brenda visited every day, her scolding lectures always ending with a container of homemade soup and the phrase, "The faucet in the back is still dripping, waiting for you to fix it." Chloe came every day after kindergarten, chattering about her day and holding his hand tight. Her cheeks were rosy, her energy boundless. The chrono crystal had worked wonders. On the day he was discharged, a car from the bureau was waiting. The driver handed him a wooden box. Inside was a chronal crystal the size of a pigeon's egg. Director Sheen said, "This is your payment for destroying the contamination source," the driver said stonily. "He also wanted me to inform you that the old church is being rebuilt under bureau supervision." Leo pocketed the crystal. All he wanted was to go home. When he got back to Reliable Hardware, he noticed the shop next door, which had been vacant for years, was now occupied. "New neighbor," Brenda said, flower on her apron. "Open an antique shop. Moved in yesterday." The sign read "The Chronos Cabinet" in elegant gold script. A young man in a traditional blue tunic and gold-rimmed glasses was carefully moving a display case inside. That evening, a strange thudding sound came from next door. The shear gear at Leo's back warmed slightly. A chronal energy fluctuation. The next morning, the young man introduced himself. "My name is Shun. A pleasure to meet you." His voice was gentle, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the hardware store, lingering for a moment on the old clock on the wall. "I see you have some fine pieces here," he said to Brenda, who was immediately charmed. Leo felt a prickle of unease. This man, Shun, was not what he seemed. Later that day, Chloe kicked her ball into the Chronos cabinet. When Leo went to retrieve it, he saw Shun polishing a bronze cog, nearly identical to the original Chronos gear. "You seem interested in this piece," Shun said, offering Leo a cup of tea. "It looks special," Leo said. "It is," Shun smiled, his eyes unreadable. "It's a replica of the first-generation Guardian's gear. A family heirloom. Have you, by any chance, heard of the Timesmiths?" Timesmiths. A secretive group of artisans who repaired temporal artifacts. His father's log had mentioned them. "I've heard the name," Leo said cautiously. "I'm a descendant of the Timesmiths," Shun said, his gaze dropping to Leo's waist. "And you, sir, seem to possess a rather fine artifact of your own." Leo grabbed the ball and left. The shear gear was hot against his back now, a clear warning. This man was more than just a simple antique dealer. Chapter 18. The Timesmith's legacy, Shun, was a quiet ripple in their lives. He kept to his shop, and Chloe took a liking to him, often visiting to show him her drawings. He was always kind, teaching her about the strange objects in his store. One evening, he came over with a gift of sweet cakes and a story. "I knew your father, Leo," he said, his voice soft. "I was there at the West Side fissure. Before he exhausted his energy, he asked me to give you this." He produced a wooden box. Inside was a silver Guardian's medal and half of a schematic, the complete design for the shear gear. "What did he say?" Leo's voice was thick with emotion. He said, "The true power of the gear is not in destruction, but in legacy." Shun's gaze fell on Chloe. "He said to tell you not to be like him, to protect what's right in front of you." Leo clutched the metal. His father had planned for this. Shun wasn't an enemy. He was a messenger. The other half of the schematic is with the revisionists. Shun's face grew grim. They want to use it to rebuild the gear and rewrite history. I've been hunting them for years. He looked at Leo. Only you can stop them now. The core components require the shear gear to activate, Leo said, closing the box. Even with the full schematic, it's useless to them without me. Shun smiled. I know I was right about you. Tonight, they're making a trade for the other half of the schematic at the old factory. I'll go, Leo cut him off. You stay here. Take care of Chloe and Brenda. Shun nodded. Be careful. This is a Timesmith's cloaking talisman. It will hide your chronal energy signature. As Leo prepared to leave, Shun handed him a modified wrench. My grandfather made this. It can sever a chronal energy line. Leo took the heavy tool. It felt like he was accepting the weight of 2 generations of responsibility. I'll be back, he said, and melted into the night. Chapter 19. The gear is whole at the factory. 3 revisionists were gathered, one of them holding the other half of the schematic. A 4th man was with them, his back to Leo. As he turned, Leo recognized him, a high-ranking official from the Temporal Bureau. The traitor. Shun appeared at Leo's side. I had a feeling you might need backup. They were spotted. The traitor pulled a gun, but Leo's cloaking talisman, thrown like a shuriken, disarmed him. The fight was on. The revisionists were augmented, fast and strong. One of them produced a black key, pulsing with a dark energy, and inserted it into a device on the table. The 2 halves of the schematic flew together, and the floor lit up with a massive, glowing gear pattern. Chronos gear reconstruction initiated. Danger level, global. Leo leaped, his shear gear clashing with the black key. The impact sent a shock wave through him. Your gear is incomplete, the revisionist holding the key cackled. Leo remembered his father's words. The true power is in legacy. He looked at Shun, who was fending off the traitor, and understood. He plunged the shear gear into the center of the glowing pattern on the floor. The pattern reversed, sucking the dark energy from the black key into the shear gear. Impossible. The revisionist screamed as the key in his hand dissolved into dust. You don't get it, Leo said, his father's metal hot against his chest. The gear isn't a weapon. It's a shield. The shear gear flared with a brilliant light, absorbing both halves of the schematic. The pattern on the floor faded. The factory fell silent. It's over, Shun said, tying up the traitor. The schematics are destroyed. The revisionists are finished. When Leo returned to the hardware store, the sun was rising. Brenda was making breakfast. Chloe ran to him with a new drawing. 2 figures holding hands, one with a wrench, one with a shear gear. Shun said, "You're a hero, Leo." Leo picked her up and kissed her forehead. "I'm not a hero, sweetie. I'm just a guy who fixes pipes." Shun was at the door. "I have to go. There are other Timesmiths I need to find." He handed Leo a piece of paper. It was the complete schematic for the shear gear. Next to the drawing was a new line of text. Guardian Leo Miller. The legacy continues. Shun smiled, then turned and walked away, his blue tunic a fading splash of color in the morning light. Sunlight filled the small shop, landing on Chloe's drawing, on Brenda's sizzling pan, on the shear gear in Leo's hand. It hummed softly, a gentle, steady warmth. Leo knew there would be other fissures, other echoes, other battles. But he was no longer afraid. He had people to protect, a legacy to uphold, and a home to return to. And that was more than enough. End of adapted text.